Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the quiet lessons hidden in history, the ones not found in textbooks, but in the rhythms of daily life long ago. Let's take it slow tonight. You might think you'd thrive in Imperial China. Maybe you picture yourself sipping tea beside a koi pond, wearing flowing silk, composing poems with a calligraphy brush, while plum blossoms drift by. But no sorry to burst your bubble, my friend, because within 10 minutes of waking up in the imperial capital, you'd already be one step away from execution. If tonight's story brings you a bit of stillness in a noisy world, you're welcome to like or subscribe, no expectations. Just an open door when you feel like returning. Let's begin. It starts with a sound. Not the gentle whisper of wind through bamboo, no. It's more like a hard wooden block slamming against stone. Tock, tock, tock. The city crier is making his rounds, pounding a clapper and announcing the fifth watch of the night. That's somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m., depending on the season. You groan and roll over, only to remember there is no mattress. Just a woven mat over wooden slats, no pillow. Your neck aches. But you have no time to complain. You're not a scholar or a merchant or a minor noble, no. You're part of the Yamen staff, the sprawling bureaucratic machine that keeps the imperial court humming. Your job, gong striker. Not glamorous, but terribly important. Your first task of the day is to walk briskly barefoot, of course. Shoes are expensive across the inner courtyard to the great bronze drum beneath the eaves of the prefect's hall. You are to strike it 7 times. Not 6, not 8, 7. If you miscount, the magistrate might assume you're drunk lazy, or worst of all, disrespectful. The last guy who miscounted is now collecting night soil with his bare hands in winter. The drum echoes across the compound, a deep, somber boom rolling through misty courtyards and tiled rooftops. And now the day begins. You brush your teeth with a twig, well, more like chew the end until it frays, and use that to scrub your molars. Then you rinse with warm water infused with salt and ginger if you're lucky. No minty freshness here, just survival. Breakfast, congee, always congee. A watery rice porridge with, if the kitchen gods are smiling, bits of pickled vegetable. Maybe a stray sesame seed. Maybe. You eat squatting by the fire, watching steam rise from your bowl and mingle with smoke from damp firewood. Someone's coughing again. Might be the cook, or the clerk from next door who never wears a scarf even in the cold. You're not worried. You can't afford to be. Let's talk about how early mornings worked in Imperial China. Timekeeping wasn't digital. No alarm clocks, not even roosters really, those were mostly in the countryside. In cities, time was tracked by the 5 watches of the night, each about 2 hours long. City officials hired night watchmen to walk the streets and mark the hours with gongs, clappers, and even bamboo flutes. If they fell asleep on duty, they could be whipped or dismissed, or worse if something went wrong during their shift. You, however, must remain alert. The officials are waking up, and soon they'll need documents, reports, sealed stamps, and of course, tea. And that tea, it's not a luxury, it's practically a necessity. Water was often unsafe, and boiling it was one way to stay alive. Everyone drank tea, the scholar, the soldier, the beggar. The only difference was what floated in it. Yours has leaves. You hope they were actually tea leaves. They might be mulberry or something someone swept off the floor. You sip anyway. You shuffle into the outer chamber of the Yamen just in time for roll call. There's an official in a black hat with wing-like flaps. He doesn't smile, ever. His assistant reads out names while others bow or grunt in reply. You nod when yours is called. Too slow, though he notices. He marks your name in red ink. Not a good sign. You'll have to run errands later, maybe deliver letters through crowded streets or copy legal briefs until your fingers blister. You sigh not audibly, just internally. Now here's the first historical tidbit to tuck into your pillow tonight. China's imperial bureaucracy was one of the most complex and merit-based in the world for those who had access. Civil service exams tested knowledge of Confucian texts, poetry, and moral philosophy. Passing them could change your life, but they were brutal. You'd spend years, decades, studying by candlelight, your family going hungry just to keep you in books. Then during the exam, you'd sit in a stone cubicle the size of a closet for 3 days, writing essays while eating cold rice balls. Some candidates went mad. Some died. One story tells of a scholar so desperate to finish his exam after falling ill, he tied his leg to the writing desk to stay upright. He passed. He also lost the leg. But you're not an exam candidate today. You're part of the machinery. Mid-morning brings new tasks, delivering scrolls, checking ink stores, scrubbing the floor before the magistrate walks through, always clockwise. That's feng shui. You're learning not just to work, but to exist within a system so old even the rats seem to know protocol. Outside, the city stirs. Vendors shout for buyers. Children chase chickens through alleyways. Bells clang from a Taoist temple. Someone's burning incense again. The smell of sandalwood seeps into your sleeves. It's oddly comforting until the shouting starts. A peasant has entered the gate. He's panicked. Someone stole his donkey, or insulted his ancestor, or possibly both. It's hard to tell through the sobs. You're told to fetch a scribe, but the scribe is napping. You wake him. He throws a sandal at you. You duck. The sandal hits the teapot. The teapot spills. The magistrate enters. The tea puddle inches toward his robe. Everyone freezes. The magistrate looks at you, then at the scribe, then at the tea. No words. Just a slight twitch in his left eye. You will now spend the next 2 hours hauling buckets from the well and re-scrubbing the entire chamber. But as the sun dips low behind the tiled roofs, something shifts. The shadows lengthen. The drums sound again. The city begins to quiet. You pause in the courtyard, bucket in hand, and feel a breeze pass through. It carries the smell of ginger and clay soot and rice steam. Above you, lanterns blink to life. Someone in a silk robe strums a guqin behind a paper window. You're exhausted, but in this moment, surrounded by ancient stone flickering firelight and the low hum of a civilization older than you can imagine, you feel something like awe. Not safety, not even peace, but awe. And maybe that's enough for now. You lie down once again on the wooden slats, pull your straw blanket to your chin, and try to quiet your mind. Tomorrow, the gongs will ring again. But for now, breathe. You're still here, still breathing, still learning. And history, strange and exhausting as it is, has whispered something to you tonight. Listen closely. Breakfast of a poor scholar. You wake to the sound of charcoal crackling and a long, slow yawn that doesn't belong to you. It echoes through the thin wooden walls of the guest quarters, just one room really separated only by dreams and wishful thinking. Someone nearby is already boiling water, not for a bath, are a luxury you can't afford, especially on exam day. The waters for tea, or something pretended to be tea. Yesterday's leaves reheated, hoping for a miracle. You sit up slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, careful not to knock over your inkstone, the same one you've used for 5 years. There's a chip on the edge shaped like a mountain. It once felt lucky. Now it just feels familiar. You reach for your writing brush, inspecting the bristles like someone tuning a stringed instrument. There's reverence in this act, or maybe desperation, because today is the prefectural exam. Let's talk about this absurdity, shall we? China's Imperial Civil Service exam was one of the most punishing academic challenges in world history. You didn't just memorize facts. Oh no. You had to absorb, analyze, and reframe Confucian philosophy until it practically lived in your spine. You were expected to compose perfect 8-legged essays. Yes, 8. That didn't mean they moved fast. It meant they followed a rigid structure like a dance choreographed by centuries of very serious, very tired men. Skip a leg and your entire argument collapsed. Like a spider trying to salsa. You shuffle into the exam hall with the other candidates, some just teenagers, others nearing 60. Everyone is silent. One carries a charm, another clutches a scroll. One man is already crying. He hasn't even sat down yet. The exam booths are stone cubicles, just big enough for one person to crouch inside. They resemble cells, or very uncomfortable confessionals. You sit, cross-legged, stiff already. You brought food, of course no one's feeding you. If you're smart, it's cold rice and bamboo leaf. If you're not, you'll faint by lunch. You brought rice, a dried plum, one boiled egg bartered by your mother with the neighbors. You eat it slowly like it's made of gold. Outside it's still cool. Inside your booth, it's sweat dust and shaky hands. You unwrap the exam prompt. It's a single line from the Analects. 学而时习之，不亦说乎? To learn and to practice what one has learned at proper intervals. Isn't that a joy? Of course it's that one. It's like being asked to write a love poem about your least favorite chore. But you begin, brush in hand, ink flowing. The strokes must be not just correct, but beautiful. Calligraphy is morality. Confucius said so, probably. Somewhere nearby, someone sneezes, then retches. You flinch, but you keep writing. A proctor walks by. You bow your head, avoiding eye contact. It's safer that way. Now, a delightful little footnote of history. People cheated, constantly. They wrote entire texts on silk and stitched them into their clothes. Some bribed guards. A few sent impersonators. One candidate was accused of plagiarism simply because his writing was too good, far too good for someone so poor. He passed, eventually, but only after showing that even his laundry lists were poetic. Your back is sore. You've lost track of time, but you finish your essay. You even tack on a clever closing couplet. The ink is barely dry when the final bell rings. You shuffle to the front, scroll in hand, tied with a red identification string. You bow, you submit, you exhale. The sun is lower now. Your breath catches in your chest. Your sleeve is stiff with ink. But you did it. You're not sure how well you did. The proctors might say your metaphors were heavy-handed, your opening too stiff, your characters too rustic. But that doesn't matter yet. You sit beneath a crooked willow tree. Unwrap your second rice ball. A child runs by chasing a paper butterfly. Somewhere, someone's boiling ginger root. The scent hangs in the air, warm and familiar. You eat slowly, because for once, you're allowed to stop thinking, to just exist, to rest. Let's soften the scene a little more. Lanterns begin to glow like shy stars scattered across wooden balconies. You hear a bamboo flute from somewhere behind a curtained window. The notes float weightless. Your fingers are cramped, your spine is a knot, but you smile just a little. Somewhere else in the city, an old scholar lights incense. He bows toward the north and opens a book he's read 100 times. Maybe he passed the exams long ago. Maybe he didn't. Either way, he still bows, still studies, still hopes like you. So tonight, you lie beneath that willow. Your satchel becomes your pillow. The wind is your blanket, and the long, strange dream of history wraps around you like the night. Soft, ancient, and for now still. When the toilet was a bamboo stick, it's morning again. You don't know what time exactly, there's no clock, and your body isn't on speaking terms with the sun anymore. But something's brewing outside. Not tea, not porridge. Movement, voices, shuffling sandals. You sit up groggy and suddenly you feel it. That familiar, urgent, unmistakable truth. You need to go, and you don't mean go for a walk. You know, you need to go now. But before you get too excited, here's the problem. You're in Imperial China, and you're not wealthy. You do not have a personal chamber pot painted with dragons. You do not have a private servant to hold scented herbs near your nose while you conduct your royal business. What you have is a decision. Option 1, a public latrine. Option 2, find a corner by the river and hope the breeze is with you. Option 3, bamboo, and not the decorative kind. You go with option 1 because you, dear scholar, are an optimist. Let's set the scene. The public latrine is a small, dark wooden shed with an uneven stone step. You approach cautiously. There's a faint smell, and by faint I mean profoundly aggressive. The air is thick. You consider turning back, but it's too late now. Inside, there's a row of squat holes carved into a raised stone slab. No stalls, no doors, just a row, like musical notes in the key of regret. Someone is already in there. 2 people, actually. One's humming, the other's coughing. No one makes eye contact. You join them. Welcome to communal humility. Now, the bamboo stick. It leans politely in a bucket of water nearby. Several, actually. About as thick as your thumb and carved smooth on one end. If you're lucky, it's been cleaned recently. If not, well, toilet paper. That's centuries away. Instead, you'll use the Chi Chuang, literally toilet stick. You wet the end. You do your business. You hope for the best. If this sounds barbaric, here's the fun part. It was considered innovative. The bamboo was reusable, practical, efficient. And in many monasteries, each stick had a little tag with the monk's name on it to prevent mix-ups. Yes, they were labeled. You cannot unknow that now. You finish as quickly as dignity allows, trying not to breathe too deeply. You rinse the stick. You bow to no one in particular and exit into fresh air like a man reborn. You wash your hands at the public basin. There is soap, kind of. It's more of a powdery gray ash mixed with citrus peel. It smells like old temples and desperation. But your hands are clean. Enough. You made it. Now a brief journey into historical plumbing. Imperial China, especially during the Tang and Song dynasties, had surprisingly advanced sanitation for its time. Cities like Chang'an had underground drainage systems, wastewater channels, and even sewage collection workers. But these were luxuries reserved for major capitals and for the rich. The average person, a hole, a stick, a prayer. In some towns, latrine waste was collected and sold as fertilizer, known as night soil. It was a thriving industry. Farmers would compete for access to the best latrines. That's right. Your bathroom visits had economic value. So, if you ever felt like you weren't contributing, cheer up. In Imperial China, you literally could be enriching the soil. Back in your part of town, a small boy chases a chicken into the alley. A grandmother yells after him waving a ladle. A fruit vendor sneezes dramatically and goes right back to peeling oranges. Life continues. And despite your traumatic morning, so do you. You stop by a stall to buy steamed buns. They're slightly burned, but you're grateful. You eat one slowly while standing. You don't dare sit, your knees are still recovering. An old man watches you from behind a pile of ginger. He smiles without teeth and says nothing, just nods. It's a moment of shared humanity because everyone has had a bamboo stick morning. Let's pause to reflect gently. There's something humbling about life before convenience. No buttons, no flushes, no perfumed wipes or glowing smart toilets that play Mozart while you ponder. Just stone, wood, water, patience, and somehow people lived, thrived even. Poets wrote verses under lantern light after squatting in those same dark stalls. Painters composed masterpieces with hands that had scrubbed with ash. Officials issued edicts after morning visits to bamboo buckets. They were human. You are too. You return to your quarters. You light a small coil of incense, not to be poetic, but to combat the memory of that latrine. It works, mostly. Your neighbor is boiling rice. The smoke trails into the sky, spiraling like calligraphy. You close your eyes, and the city hums softly now. Lanterns sway, a lute twangs. Someone laughs in the distance. You're tired, but not from what you did, from what you remembered, that even the smallest moments, morning rituals, awkward embarrassments, quiet recoveries, are part of what makes history human. It's not always emperors and wars. Sometimes it's just the bathroom. So lie back, breathe in, let it all drift away. The stone floors, the bamboo stick, the strange soap, the old man's smile, and the soft, steady truth. You're still here, still breathing, still laughing maybe. And even when the day starts with a bamboo stick, it can still end in peace. Shaved heads, saved lives. You've made it through the night, mostly. The floor was hard, the blanket was thin, and someone next door snores like a saw stuck in a tree trunk. But the sun is up now, filtered through a pale rice paper screen, warm and golden like kanji before it cools. You stretch your arms, your back cracks. A sparrow chirps from the roof beam. Today feels calm until you catch your reflection in the basin. Oh no, your hair. It's not just messy, it's risky. Because today isn't just any day, it's inspection day. The prefectural guards are walking the neighborhoods, checking for rebels, deserters, and most of all for hair. Specifically, hair that isn't shaved in the correct pattern. If you were born under the Ming Dynasty, you kept your hair long tied in a bun. It symbolized respect for your parents. You didn't dare cut what your ancestors gave you. But the Qing dynasty, whole new rules. New rulers, new hairstyles, new punishments. Let's take a gentle detour. In 1644, the Manchus conquered China and established the Qing dynasty. But they weren't just interested in thrones and taxes. No, they wanted visible loyalty. So they imposed the Q order. Every Han Chinese male was forced to shave the front half of his head and braid the rest into a long tail. Refusing to do so was seen as treason. The slogan was blunt: keep your hair and lose your head, or cut your hair and keep it. Catchy, terrifying. This wasn't a fashion statement. It was a political line drawn in hair. Back to you. You scramble for a mirror-polished bronze plate. Yep, still fluffy, still dangerously Ming-looking. No time to panic. You pull out the shaving blade, a rusted iron strip with a handle worn smooth from nerves. You wet your scalp with cold tea. Why waste water? Then, with the focus of a monk and the speed of a criminal, you shave the front half of your head clean. It's not graceful. You nick your ear. But it's done. You tie the rest into a thin, humble braid. Not elegant, not symmetrical, but compliant. You breathe. You're safe for now. Someone knocks on your door. You freeze. It's your neighbor, Old Liu. He's 70. If he's a day with no teeth, a cane, and more opinions than relatives. He grins at your new haircut. Crooked, he says, but loyal. You don't know if that's a compliment. But he brings you a sweet rice cake wrapped in lotus leaf. You accept it like treasure. It's warm and smells like almond and memory. Together, you sit on the step, chewing in silence. Down the alley, a group of soldiers passes, boots thumping in perfect rhythm. They don't look at you. You try not to look at them either. Here's something quietly strange. Some people mourn their hair like it was a funeral. Cutting it felt like cutting identity. Others adapted. Barbers opened early, offering loyalty shaves for a fee and a small prayer. The black market, oh, it thrived. Fake braids made of horsehair. Painted scalp patches for people who didn't want to shave. One man even trained pigeons to land on his head so he could claim he was too holy to cut what birds had blessed. He was arrested, but still impressive creativity. Later that afternoon, a small commotion breaks out near the temple. A young man is caught with unshaved hair. You're not close enough to hear the argument, but you see the gestures, the pointing, the guard's hands on hilts. The man kneels. He offers coins, then tears. Eventually, a razor is brought out. His friends hold him still. He weeps as the blade shaves away his front locks each stroke, a small funeral. The crowd disperses. Quietly, you turn away, not because you don't care, but because you've seen enough for one day. And also, your braid is still wet and you're afraid it might unravel. The evening finds you back at your little bench now, with a cup of hot water and a sliver of candied ginger. Your scalp tingles. The wind teases your braid. You wonder if someone saw you now from a century ahead, would they understand? Would they see fear, obedience, survival? Or would they just say, nice haircut? The stars appear slowly, one by one, like ink spots in the parchment of night. The city winds down. The guards finish their rounds, and your scalp finally stops stinging. You lie back against the wooden post eyes, half closed, the braid falling softly over your shoulder. No pillow, no luxury, but peace and a little less hair. So tonight, as you settle beneath the slow, steady hush of lantern light, know this: history isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a haircut, a choice, a razor blade at dawn, and the quiet relief that you'll see another sunrise. Summer in silk robes, you wake up sweating again. The kind of sweat that clings to your back like a wet leaf and drips into places you didn't even know had sweat glands. You're not under a blanket; those were abandoned 2 nights ago. You're barely even under a roof, just enough covering to keep the sun from frying your eyebrows. It's summer in the Imperial City, and you are melting. You peel yourself off the mat with the slow reluctance of old rice off a bamboo steamer. Now everything sticks. Your robe, thin as it is, feels like an insult to physics. Silk is supposed to be light breathable, but today it's a clingy ghost made of damp air and resentment. You sit up. The world is already shimmering with heat. Cicadas scream from the trees like tiny fire alarms. A dog pants near the gate. Someone 2 houses down is fanning themselves with a bamboo leaf and muttering about how their ancestors never had to suffer like this. Spoiler, they did. Let's pause for a moment and talk about how truly awful summer could be in Imperial China. Forget air conditioning. Fans weren't electric. They were paper bamboo, or if you were wealthy feathered, you waved them yourself or bribed someone else to wave them for you. Architecture helped to a point. Houses were built with courtyards to catch breezes, with shaded eaves and clay tiles that absorbed less heat than stone. But when the air stood still, which it often did, even the buildings seemed to sweat. Silk was everywhere, robes, bedding, banners, but in the summer, silk could betray you. It held humidity. It refused to dry. It clung like guilt, and yet you wore it anyway, because status, because tradition, because even when your bones are boiling, appearance matters. You shuffle to the corner of your room where the water basin waits. You splash your face. The water's warm. Not refreshing warm soup, warm. But you pretend anyway. Your neighbor walks by fanning himself with a lacquered fan shaped like a peach. He's shirtless. You envy him, but you can't go shirtless. You're expected at the registrar's office. There's a census being reviewed today, and you have to transcribe notes while pretending not to pass out. You sigh, pick up your silk robe, still damp from yesterday's sweat, and put it on. It whispers against your skin like a disapproving ant. You tighten the sash. You step into the heat. Outside, it's like walking into a kiln. The street shimmers. Chickens walk in slow motion. A pair of men move a cart of melons, stopping every few steps to wipe their necks and swear at the sun. A vendor is boiling peanuts in brine. Why anyone wants hot food right now is a mystery. You nod at her anyway. Respect. She's out here doing this in long sleeves. You pass the temple where even the incense seems too tired to rise. The monk at the gate fans himself with a book of scripture. You reach the registrar's hall, a low square building with a slanted roof and heavy red beams. Inside, the air is no cooler, but it's shaded. Someone brings out a bowl of crushed ice wrapped in lotus leaves. You eye it like it's a sacred artifact. You are not allowed to touch it. Now, here's a curious thing. Imperial China did have ways to cool off. There were ice pits, massive underground storage vaults filled with winter ice and insulated with straw. The state managed these, carefully distributing ice to the court, to officials, and very occasionally to people of extreme rank or favor. If you were rich enough, You could afford chilled fruit, iced wine, even cooling jade pillows. Yes, pillows made of jade, not soft but cold, and that was enough. But for you, you settle for fanning your sleeves and hoping someone faints before you do just to set a precedent. Your hand cramps halfway through the morning. The brush sticks to your fingers. The ink starts to smear. Your silk robe feels like it's fermenting. You lean back just enough to catch a breeze through the carved lattice window. It smells faintly of plum blossoms and someone grilling fish in the alley. The combination is not ideal. Still, you survive until midday. You don't faint. You don't scream. You just quietly erase a character you smudged with the side of your hand and rewrite it for the fourth time. Victory comes in small, sweaty packages. At lunch, someone shares pickled cucumbers soaked in vinegar and ginger. You eat slowly, savoring the crunch. It feels like a gift from the gods, or at least from someone with a garden and good timing. You find a spot beneath a willow and unroll your sleeves. The shade is thin. The sweat continues, but you're alive. Evening creeps in, not cool, just darker. The cicadas are replaced by frogs. The air smells of smoke, soy, and wet stone. You change into a clean robe, which takes on moisture like a sponge. Still, it's better than the last one. A child runs by with a fan shaped like a butterfly. It flaps once and collapses. You lie down on the wooden floorboards. No mat, no blanket. Just the breeze if it shows up. You close your eyes. Let's end here softly. Summer in the Empire isn't a season, it's a challenge. It strips you down not of status or dignity, but of comfort. And yet, life carries on. Ink dries. Fans flutter. Tea cools in cracked cups. You dream of snow, not to escape, but to remember that heat, like all things, passes. And that sometimes the quietest resilience is simply waking up again tomorrow. Silk, clinging hair, damp and heart steady. Gods in every corner. The morning begins with smoke, not fire, not danger, just incense curling in slow sacred spirals from the red clay dish by your door. You didn't light it. Your landlord did. He does this every morning, sometimes twice if the wind shifts. You open your eyes. Your nose tingles. Sandalwood maybe, or mugwort, or dried orange peel mixed with something you can't name but recognize from temple festivals and childhood. Another day in the Empire. Another day under the watchful eyes of everything. Because in Imperial China, there's a god for every corner. And today, you're going to try not to offend any of them. You sit up slowly, offering a little nod to the incense burner. Not because you believe exactly, but because why risk it? The air feels still, as if holding its breath. Outside, someone rings a bell once, twice, pause, then again. It's not the timekeeper today. It's the neighbor's grandson playing temple. You smile. Then you spot it. On the windowsill, a folded slip of yellow paper, carefully inked with vermilion brushstrokes. A protective charm. Someone's been by. Maybe the herbalist. Maybe your aunt. Maybe both. You pick it up gently. It smells faintly of wax and pine smoke. You don't know what it says, but you tuck it behind a jar anyway. Next to last week's. You're collecting gods one paper at a time. Let's pause and set the stage. In Imperial China, the spiritual world wasn't something separate from the everyday. It was the framework of the everyday. Every house had a god, Every street had a shrine. Every kitchen, every shop, every boat, every rice paddy, someone divine was watching over it. There was a god of the stove who monitored your household's moral health and filed a report to heaven once a year. A god of the doorway guarding your threshold. A god of the city walls keeping out more than just invaders. There were ancestor spirits to appease wandering ghosts to avoid, and lucky spirits to attract with food, fire, or folded paper money, turned into tiny fans and set alight. And if you didn't keep up with the rituals, well, the gods didn't always get angry, but they did get quiet. And in a world so full of things you couldn't control, silence was its own kind of curse. You rise and wash your face at the basin, there's a coin balanced on the ledge, a sign. From whom? No idea. You leave it exactly where it is. Breakfast is a steamed bun and a bowl of hot soy milk. You offer a small pinch of each to the god shelf near the hearth. Just a gesture. The shelf is crowded. There's the stove god, of course, wearing his usual crimson hat. He's flanked by 2 carved wooden lions, an old coin nailed above his head, and a cracked porcelain statue of what might be a goddess or a badly sculpted dragon. No one remembers, but they still bow because you never know. Midday, you walk through the market. Every third stall has its own altar oranges stacked in threes, coils of incense, a coin glued upright in a cup of rice. Someone's burning spirit money sheets of thin gray paper printed with the image of a celestial banknote. The smoke rises like wishes written in a language the gods might still read. You turn a corner and nearly step on a rooster. It glares at you. Behind it, a shrine built into the base of a banyan tree. Someone's left candy there, and a note. The note says, "Please don't take the candy. It's for the tree spirit." Thank you. You leave it alone. Let's wander gently through the folklore. Did you know the stove god returned to heaven every Lunar New Year? He did, but before he left, you had to bribe him. Seriously, you offered sweet foods, honey syrup, sticky rice cakes, in the hopes he'd have a sweet mouth when he reported your family's behavior to the Jade Emperor. Some people even smeared his statue with sugar or wine just to make sure he spoke kindly. Others burned his paper effigy and sent him skyward on a cloud of smoke. Then they replaced him with a new one. Job security for the divine. Back in your part of town, the sun dips low. Shadows stretch across the courtyard. You light a small candle, not for reading, but for reassurance. The night is full of gods, too. You nod toward the corner shelf again. There's no wind, but the flame flickers. You're not alone. You never are. Sleep comes slowly tonight. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the candle. Maybe it's the weight of all those silent watches perched in corners, tucked in shadows, folded into paper slips, and hollowed out wood carvings. You close your eyes. You whisper a small thanks, not to anyone in particular, just in case. And that, perhaps, is the quiet truth of faith in a world like this. You don't always know who's listening. You just hope someone is. And that hope is enough to keep lighting the incense, enough to offer the orange, enough to bow to a cracked statue with a lopsided smile. So tonight, as the last of the candle melts into sleep, remember this: even in the stillest corners, something ancient lingers. Something watching. Something gentle. Something sacred. Not in thunder, but in ash and paper, in soft offerings, in belief that hums just beneath the skin of the world. Exam or exile, you're up before the sun again, not because you're disciplined, not because you're virtuous, but because someone down the road is already reciting Confucius, loudly, off-key. You rub your eyes already dreading the day, not because it's hot, not because you slept on what can only be described as a blanket made of regrets. No, you dread it because today is another exam day, not yours, your cousin's, and you've been asked to accompany him, which means you'll be standing in line carrying scrolls, bribing guards, and pretending to be helpful while he sweats his soul onto parchment. You sigh deeply, quietly, because complaining in Imperial China doesn't get you anywhere. Unless, of course, you're writing an essay about the moral implications of complaining and doing it in 8 perfect symmetrical paragraphs. You wrap your robe tightly. It smells faintly of ink, dust, and despair. Your cousin arrives wearing his lucky belt, one that's never actually brought him luck, but is too deeply part of the ritual to remove now. He's pale, sweaty, mumbling something about Mencius. You hand him a steamed bun. He eats it without tasting it. Then you set off into the tangled maze of exam day chaos. Let's pause here, because if you've ever thought standardized testing was bad, now let me gently inform you, you wouldn't last 5 minutes under the imperial exam system. They called it the Keiju, which loosely translates to you too can suffer for knowledge and possibly die in the process. This was not a morning affair, no multiple choice bubbles or scantrons. These were multi-day marathon sessions held in exam yards that resembled prisons more than schools. You entered with supplies, you exited with a limp, if you exited at all. When you and your cousin reached the Gong Yuan, the examination compound, it's already buzzing. Candidates shuffle in carrying ink stones, bamboo cases, bundles of food, and enough anxiety to power a city. Each test taker is assigned a cell, a tiny stone cubicle about the size of a coffin with a slope tile for writing and enough space to sit but not stand, or lie down, or breathe deeply. They'll be in there for 3 full days. You look at your cousin. He looks like he's about to cry. You pat his shoulder in a way that says, "May the gods be merciful." You mean it. Here's the twist. If your cousin passes, he becomes part of the elite, a scholar official, a gentleman, a bearer of ink and influence. If he fails, he can try again and again and again until his back curves like a question mark and his fingers forget how to hold anything but a brush. Some candidates spend decades chasing this dream. One man reportedly passed on his 70th attempt at the age of 81. He celebrated by collapsing, possibly from joy, possibly from exhaustion. Back inside the exam yard, your cousin vanishes into his cell. You're not allowed to follow, so you wait, with the other brothers' friends, aunts, and neighbors all anxiously pacing near the gates. Some whisper prayers, others gossip about last year's essay prompt. Was the mandate of heaven moral or political? One man swears his cousin bribed the examiners with dried scallops. Another says he wrote his entire essay backwards for good luck. You sit, you wait. You nap under a tree with roots older than most dynasties. Day 1, silence. Day 2, murmurs of someone fainting. Day 3, a boy is carried out by guards raving about dragons and quoting poetry at pigeons. Standard stuff. Finally, your cousin emerges. His robe is stained. His eyes are wild. He's holding his scroll like it contains the meaning of life, or at least decent grammar. He doesn't speak. You walk him home in silence. That night, he eats 2 bowls of noodles and falls asleep with his head on the table. Weeks pass. Then one morning, a drumbeat sounds at the examination hall. The results are posted. You and your cousin join the crowd. People push forward. Names are called. Some cheer, some faint. One man throws his hat into the air and is promptly fined for disorderly conduct. Your cousin. He stares at the list. He blinks once, twice. Then he turns to you. He passed by 1 rank, the lowest possible. But he passed. He doesn't shout. He doesn't dance. He just lets out a long breath that sounds like it's been trapped in his lungs since the womb. You smile, and for a moment, the street noise fades. The incense smoke seems lighter. The world feels still. Then someone behind you yells, "He passed with that essay." You both walk away quickly. Let's end here, softly. Because tonight, in a world of stone walls and brushstrokes, someone just rewrote their future. Not with a sword, not with wealth, but with ink and a whole lot of sweat. So, as you lie back tonight, listening to the cicadas whisper through the window shutters, let this be your gentle reminder. Sometimes survival is an exam, and sometimes passing means more than just a score. It means a door opens, a burden lifts, and the world just for a moment exhales with you. The lonely life inside the forbidden city. The walls are tall. You can't see the sky unless you tilt your head so far back it hurts your neck. The bricks stretch high above red and silent as if they were built to hold in secrets rather than just roofs and roofs of curved tile. This is not your home, not really. But for today, maybe for a few years, maybe for life, it's where you live. Because today you enter the Forbidden City, and you will never again be alone while feeling more alone than ever. Let's start with the walk. The main gate looms ahead, Meridian Gate, tall and golden roofed, always under guard, always shadowed. You pass through it, not with ceremony, but with caution. You're not royalty, not even close. You're staff. You've been selected, plucked from a long line of anonymous faces and ink-stained hands to assist in one of the palace offices. Maybe copying reports, maybe polishing scroll tubes, maybe lighting lamps before dusk, bowing with each step. You're not told exactly what. You're just told to bow low, often, silently. Inside, it's quiet, but not the comforting kind. The quiet here is polished, structured, enforced. Every sound feels magnified. Your footsteps echo along stone corridors. The rustle of your robe feels like thunder. You dare not cough. A eunuch with a pale blue sash leads you past rows of buildings that all look alike, sloping eaves, upturned corners, animal tiles on the ridges. They shimmer in gold leaf and imperial red. But the people, they don't shimmer. They glide, eyes low, faces calm, movements rehearsed. You're not sure if they're happy. You're not even sure if they're real. Let's pause here and peel back the lacquer. The Forbidden City heart of the Ming and Qing dynasties was a palace of over 900 buildings, nearly 9,000 rooms, walls upon walls, gates upon gates, each more impressive than the last. From above it looked symmetrical, balanced, perfect from inside. It was a world built for one man, the emperor, and shaped around his whims, rituals, and fears. It held concubines, eunuchs, guards, cooks, scribes, artists, tutors, astrologers. Some lived there for life. Some never left the inner court, ever. It was not just a palace. It was a gilded maze, and most who entered never found the exit again. You're taken to a room with no windows. You're told to sit. You're handed a brush, a piece of yellow paper, and a copy of yesterday's edict. Your job is to copy it 30 times, in the same style, same size, no smudges. A single mistake means starting over. You begin. Hours pass. Your fingers cramp. Your knees ache from sitting still. Outside the door, a bell chimes the hour. You don't know which one. Time here is marked in tasks, not moments. You finish 20 copies before the bell chimes again. Someone takes the stack from you without a word. You bow. They nod. It is not approval. It is protocol. At dinner, you eat quietly with others like you boys from the provinces, hands stained with ink, heads full of fear and vague hope. The food is bland but clean. Rice, boiled greens, a sliver of tofu in pale broth. No one speaks. A man at the end of the table eats with his eyes closed. Maybe he's praying. Maybe he's remembering the outside. You want to ask where he's from, but you don't. You don't know who's listening. Later, you're shown to your sleeping quarters. They are tucked behind the hall of literary brilliance, though no brilliance exists here. Just narrow cots, thin blankets, a brazier that has gone cold, and no candles allowed after nightfall. You lie down. The ceiling is low. You can hear someone crying 2 mats away. Softly, rhythmically, you do not move. Here's a quiet truth most history books skip. The Forbidden City was full of people who could not leave, concubines who never saw their families again, eunuchs who lived their entire adult lives behind red walls, guards who died in the same uniform they wore at 16. Loneliness wasn't just common, it was designed. You were to focus, serve, obey. No distractions, no attachments, no exits. Still, there were small rebellions. Some painted secret poems behind scrolls. Some sent coded messages to the kitchens in carved fruit. Some simply remembered the scent of river wind, the chirp of a certain bird, the way sunlight looked on a tiled village roof. Memory was the last freedom. You lie awake long after the others fall silent. The walls creak. Somewhere a flute plays in the distance, soft broken, like it's remembering a song, but not the ending. You close your eyes. You try to picture your mother's face. It's already blurry, but the feeling still warm. So tonight, as the stillness wraps itself around your shoulders like a second blanket, let yourself feel this. You are small, you are unseen, but you are still here. And even in the most gilded cage, there's something no walls can hold. You surviving the bureaucracy. The rooster crows before dawn. You weren't sleeping anyway. You were too busy dreaming of paper, stacks of it, towers of it, whole cities built from scrolls rising into the clouds like bureaucratic mountains. And in your dream, you were falling, drowning beneath them. You wake to find it wasn't entirely a dream. Your cot is surrounded by bundles of documents waiting to be copied, stamped, reviewed, or delivered. The emperor hasn't even had breakfast yet, but the bureaucracy is already hungry, and you're on the menu. You dress in silence. The robe is plain gray cotton. It used to be white once, before the ink stains, before the months of sweat candle soot and spilled tea. You tie your sash with one hand while holding a brush in the other. Efficiency. It's the only way to survive here. Outside, the sky is a pale wash of blue. Lanterns sway from carved beams. The hallway echoes with soft footsteps. Everyone walks the same way, eyes forward, mouth closed, purposeful, but not hurried. Too slow and you're lazy. Too fast and you're suspicious. Bureaucracy has a pace, and it never stops. You arrive at your assigned office, an administrative wing, beneath the shadow of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, which is a lovely name for a building filled with tension parchment and men who argue with their eyebrows. Your job today, seal placement. Yes, that's right. You are responsible for ensuring that the red Imperial seal is placed exactly where it belongs on each official document. Not slightly left, not slightly tilted, not smudged, not crooked. If the stamp bleeds through the paper, you start over. If you sneeze mid-seal, you start over. If someone more senior disagrees with your placement, even slightly, over. Let's step back. In Imperial China, bureaucracy wasn't just administration. It was philosophy. It was identity. It was survival. Every official document was handwritten. Every decree reviewed by multiple layers of scribes, secretaries, advisors, and clerks. There were departments for agriculture, taxation, salt granaries, canal transport, census records, calendar calculations, imperial examinations, punishment, revisions, even the weather. You heard me. There was a whole office just for rain, not making it, just reporting it. And each department had rules, and those rules had rules. And your job was to follow all of them perfectly without asking why. By mid-morning, you've sealed 43 scrolls. Your fingers are numb, your shoulders ache, your tea has gone cold. A supervisor walks by. He doesn't speak, just lifts one of your finished scrolls and examines it through slitted eyes. You watch his brow twitch. Once, he puts the scroll down, moves on. You exhale, slowly, like someone who's just avoided being eaten by a quiet tiger. There are whispers in the hallway later. One clerk forgot a stamp on a tax report. The report went all the way to the Minister of Revenue. Now the clerk's been reassigned to latrine duty. In July, you make a mental note to triple check your seals. Lunch is steamed rice and bean paste. You eat on a low bench with your fellow clerks. No one speaks for the first 10 minutes. Conversation is dangerous unless you know who's listening. Eventually, someone mutters a joke about the great flood of unfiled reports. A few chuckles. Someone coughs into their sleeve, then silence again. Here's the strange part. You begin to find comfort in the rhythm. The brush, the paper, the stamp, the drying ink. There's something meditative about it. Repetitive, yes, but also grounding. You can't control the emperor or politics or the rising price of rice. But you can control this one scroll, this one seal, this one line of text. And sometimes that's enough. Later in the afternoon, a senior official stops by. He doesn't say hello, just points to a stack of outgoing letters. You carry them across the compound to the courier's quarters. On the way, you pass a courtyard filled with potted plum trees. The petals drift in the breeze like tiny paper slips. One lands on your sleeve. You leave it there. You wonder if anyone else sees them, or if they're all too busy surviving the scrolls. Evening falls. You finish the last scroll. The light is dim. The candle flickers. You stretch your hands, flexing ink-stiff fingers. The supervisor nods once. It is in this place the equivalent of thunderous applause. You bow. You walk home. You lie down on your cot. There's a scroll beneath your head you forgot to file. You push it aside. Close your eyes. Tomorrow will bring more paper, more stamps, more silence. But for tonight, you have survived another day of impossible standards. You have not been reassigned to the latrines. You have not smeared the seal. You are still here, so breathe easy. The empire rests on paperwork, and somehow, tonight, the empire is still standing because you showed up, because you followed the lines, because even under the crushing weight of ink and expectation, you remembered how to breathe, calloused hands, and painted pots. The sky today is the color of wet clay gray cool and holding the scent of rain that might come but hasn't yet. You're already at the kiln, not because you're early, but because the master potter insists on beginning before sunrise. Something about the spirits being more cooperative in the cold hours. Or maybe he just likes to see apprentices stumble through the dark with pails of water and half-tied robes. Either way, you're here, and your hands, they already hurt. You're not a scholar today, not a clerk, not a scribe floating on rivers of red ink. Today you're an artisan. More specifically, you're the assistant to a man who speaks to clay like it's family and yells at you like you're deaf. You carry a bowl to the shaping bench. Yesterday it was just mud. Today it's almost a pot. Tomorrow it might be a masterpiece or a pile of shards if someone bumps it before the firing. And by someone, of course, he means you. Let's take a moment and get our hands dirty in the past. Porcelain was one of Imperial China's most prized exports. It was called white gold by people who didn't understand how fragile it was. To make it, you needed fine kaolin clay, clean water ash glazes, mineral pigments, the right weather, the right fire, the right everything. The kilns in places like Jingdezhen ran like cities, thousands of workers. One goal, perfection. One mistake, and the whole batch, sometimes hundreds of pieces, was ruined. Back to you. You grind the cobalt pigment slowly, carefully adding just enough water to make the brush glide. Not too wet, not too dry, not too bold, not too faint. The design is simple waves and clouds, but the stroke must be confident. Hesitate, and the line wobbles. The master watches. You paint. He grunts. You're not sure if that means good job or don't breathe near me. You decide to stop breathing anyway, just in case. The fire hasn't been lit yet. That comes later, when the shelves are full, when the clay is dry, when the gods are in a forgiving mood. Kiln firing is part chemistry, part ritual, and part leap of faith. You can do everything right and still open the door to ash and disappointment. Sometimes the glaze cracks. Sometimes the pot warps. Sometimes the fire whispers, "Not today." And when that happens, you start over. No questions, no tears, just more clay. At midday, you pause to eat. Your rice is packed in a cracked bowl, one of the master's failed experiments. He eats from a flawless dish with gold trim. He offers you a slice of pickled radish. You nod, grateful. You eat slowly. The radish is too salty, but It wakes you up. Your hands sting from scrubbing. Your sleeves smell like smoke and wet dust. But for the first time today, no one is yelling. That's enough. Let's not romanticize this too much. Artisans were skilled, yes, but often poor, anonymous, and replaceable. You could make a vase that sat on the emperor's table and still go home to a house with no windows. You could craft something that crossed oceans, dazzled kings, changed history, and never be remembered by name. But in the cool hush of the workshop, as you shape something from nothing, there's a kind of quiet power. You don't control much, but you control this: the pressure of your thumb, the curve of the rim, the choice to begin again. Later, you help load the kiln. It's hot, always. Even before it's lit, the kiln radiates memory. Fire lingers in its walls like an old whisper. You carry pots carefully, 2 at a time, balanced on bamboo trays. You place them gently on the shelves, praying under your breath that they don't wobble. The master lays the firewood. He lights the kindling, and then you wait. Hours pass, the fire roars, the sky darkens, ash falls like snow. You sit with the others in the courtyard sipping water that tastes like smoke and iron. No one talks much. Firing day is serious, not solemn, but focused. Because everything you've done for days or weeks now hangs in the balance. You stare into the flames, watching the shadows dance along the edges of the bricks. It's beautiful, terrifying, and completely out of your hands. When the kiln cools tomorrow or the next day, you'll open the door and find out what survived. Maybe your bowl, maybe your wave pattern, maybe nothing. But tonight, you've done your part. You've shaped the clay, painted the line, lit the fire, and now you rest. So, as you curl up near the kiln wall, warm from the last breath of the flames, let yourself exhale. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try again tomorrow, and maybe just maybe what you make will last longer than your name. Calloused hands and painted pots. The sky today is the color of wet clay, gray cool, and holding the scent of rain that might come but hasn't yet. You're already at the kiln, not because you're early, but because the master potter insists on beginning before sunrise. Something about the spirits being more cooperative in the cold hours. Or maybe he just likes to see apprentices stumble through the dark with pails of water and half-tied robes. Either way, you're here, and your hands, they already hurt. You're not a scholar today, not a clerk, not a scribe floating on rivers of red ink. Today, you're an artisan. More specifically, you're the assistant to a man who speaks to clay like it's family and yells at you like you're deaf. You carry a bowl to the shaping bench. Yesterday, it was just mud. Today, it's almost a pot. Tomorrow, it might be a masterpiece or a pile of shards if someone bumps it before the firing. And by someone, of course, he means you. Let's take a moment and get our hands dirty in the past. Porcelain was one of Imperial China's most prized exports. It was called white gold by people who didn't understand how fragile it was. To make it, you needed fine kaolin clay, clean water, ash glazes, mineral pigments, the right weather, the right fire, the right everything. The kilns in places like Jingdezhen ran like cities. Thousands of workers, one goal, perfection. One mistake, and the whole batch, sometimes hundreds of pieces, was ruined. Back to you. You grind the cobalt pigment slowly, carefully, adding just enough water to make the brush glide. Not too wet, not too dry, not too bold, not too faint. The design is simple waves and clouds, but the stroke must be confident. Hesitate, and the line wobbles. The master watches. You paint. He grunts. You're not sure if that means good job or don't breathe near me. You decide to stop breathing anyway, just in case. The fire hasn't been lit yet. That comes later, when the shelves are full, when the clay is dry, when the gods are in a forgiving mood. Kiln firing is part chemistry, part ritual, and part leap of faith. You can do everything right and still open the door to ash and disappointment. Sometimes the glaze cracks. Sometimes the pot warps. Sometimes the fire whispers, "Not today." And when that happens, you start over. No questions, no tears, just more clay. At midday, you pause to eat. Your rice is packed in a cracked bowl, one of the master's failed experiments. He eats from a flawless dish with gold trim. He offers you a slice of pickled radish. You nod grateful. You eat slowly. The radish is too salty, but it wakes you up. Your hands sting from scrubbing. Your sleeves smell like smoke and wet dust. But for the first time today, no one is yelling. That's enough. Let's not romanticize this too much. Artisans were skilled, yes, but often poor, anonymous, and replaceable. You could make a vase that sat on the emperor's table and still go home to a house with no windows. You could craft something that crossed oceans, dazzled kings, changed history, and never be remembered by name. But in the cool hush of the workshop, as you shape something from nothing, there's a kind of quiet power. You don't control much, but you control this, the pressure of your thumb, the curve of the rim, the choice to begin again. Later, you help load the kiln. It's hot, always. Even before it's lit, the kiln radiates memory. Fire lingers in its walls like an old whisper. You carry pots carefully, 2 at a time, balanced on bamboo trays. You place them gently on the shelves, praying under your breath that they don't wobble. The master lays the firewood. He lights the kindling. And then you wait. Hours pass. The fire roars. The sky darkens. Ash falls like snow. You sit with the others in the courtyard, sipping water that tastes like smoke and iron. No one talks much. Firing day is serious, not solemn, but focused, because everything you've done for days or weeks now hangs in the balance. You stare into the flames, watching the shadows dance along the edges of the bricks. It's beautiful, terrifying, and completely out of your hands. When the kiln cools tomorrow or the next day, you'll open the door and find out what survived. Maybe your bowl, maybe your wave pattern, maybe nothing. But tonight, you've done your part. You've shaped the clay, painted the line, lit the fire, and now you rest. So, as you curl up near the kiln wall, warm from the last breath of the flames, let yourself exhale. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try again tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, what you make will last longer than your name. The noble cat and the hungry servant. There's a meow at the kitchen door. Not a polite one, not the kind that asks permission. This is a demand. Short, sharp, and absolutely confident that someone somewhere has forgotten whose palace this really is. You look up from your bowl of porridge, which is more hot water than grain, and meet the golden gaze of a creature who clearly hasn't missed a meal in its life. The palace cat. Silky, fat, and entitled, you bow instinctively. Because, let's be honest, in this house, you work for the cat. The cat has a name, but no one dares say it aloud unless they have clean hands and a good excuse. It's something long and poetic, jade whisper of the lotus moon, or possibly grand emissary of the courtyard mice. No one's really sure. Mostly, you just call him Sir. He saunters in tail-high hops onto the only cushion in the kitchen circles 3 times and plops down with a sigh that suggests he's had a long day thinking about imperial politics. You offer a bit of your porridge. He sniffs it. He sneezes. You apologize. Let's step sideways into history. Cats in Imperial China were not just pets. They were symbols of luck, of calm, of scholarly elegance. They appeared in poetry and brush paintings and dreams. A cat curled beneath a scroll shelf was the ideal companion for a tired scholar. They were yin to the scholar's yang, grace to his effort. And if you were wealthy, you could afford a cat that ate better than most humans. Steamed fish, minced duck, quail eggs. There are actual records of palace cats being assigned servants. That's right, the cat had a man. You, by the way, are not the man. You're the backup man. Sir yawns and stretches, revealing claws that gleam like polished lacquer. A young maid arrives with a tray of trimmings from the noble table meat slices, so thin they're translucent, and a fish head so perfectly steamed it looks like a porcelain sculpture. The tray is set down with reverence. Sir glances at it, sniffs, and walks away. Of course, you sigh quietly because guess who's cleaning that up? Here's something funny. If you're not too hungry to laugh, in some noble households, cats were included in family portraits, not sitting beside the servants, no, on cushions, wearing ribbon collars. One tale even speaks of a cat being given a silk robe during New Year's. Meanwhile, the kitchen boy got a turnip and a smile. Maybe later, while cleaning the tiles near the side hall, you catch sight of Sir again, lounging on a sun-warmed sill, purring like a contented bell. He meets your eyes and blinks slowly. A blessing. You bow, because of course you do. You once saw a minor official get demoted for stepping on the tail of a noblewoman's favorite tabby. The cat was fine. The official, not so much. At dinner, you get your usual rice greens broth. You eat quickly, without fanfare. Sir eats next to the magistrate's youngest son, who's hand-feeding him duck liver with lacquered chopsticks. Sir accepts the food like an emperor receiving tribute from a distant province. The son grins delighted. Sir blinks once, then turns and vomits delicately on the floor. The boy apologizes to the cat. You silently mop it up. Let's not pretend this is all absurd. There's something calming about having a creature in the palace who doesn't care about rank or duty or the endless rituals of court life. Sir doesn't bow. Sir doesn't flatter. Sir doesn't pretend. He just is warm, soft, indifferent. And in a place where everything is about performance, where every blink is judged, every gesture recorded, he's a reminder that sometimes being still is power. Night falls. The kitchen quiets. Sir returns, hopping onto the hearth, where the coals still glow faintly. He curls beside your leg, not quite touching, but close enough that you feel the weight of him. The warmth. You don't move. Your hand rests on the stone floor. His paw rests beside it. A truce. You won't speak of it. He would deny it. But in the hush of the night, as lanterns dim and the palace breathes its slow, ancient breath, you feel a kind of comfort. Maybe not respect, maybe not love, but a shared silence. And in a world like this, that's everything. So tonight, as you close your eyes and curl into the space beneath the kitchen shelf, know this: there are emperors, there are scholars, there are servants, and there are cats. And sometimes, the cat is the only one who gets to sleep wherever he wants. A night without candles. The wind tonight feels older than usual. It slips through the narrow alleys like a silk ribbon tugged by something unseen. It rattles the shutters. It whispers through the paper screens. It blows out 3 candles in one breath, then leaves the room completely dark. You don't relight them, not because you're brave, because you're out of wax. You sit in the stillness, blinking into the black. Your fingers brush the edge of your writing mat. You can just make out the faint outline of your inkstone, the cold curve of your teacup. But mostly, what you feel is space. And what you hear is everything. The drip of water from a cracked roof tile, the distant shuffle of feet from another insomniac across the courtyard, the soft, high hum of a night insect you've never seen, but always hear. The night is long, and you are awake. Let's talk about darkness gently. In Imperial China, light was expensive. Candles were made from animal fat or beeswax, both rare for common people. Oil lamps required sesame oil, which was better saved for cooking. Paper lanterns were for festivals or offerings, not midnight errands to the chamber pot. So most nights, you simply did without. You let the dark in like an uninvited guest and hoped it behaved. You wrap yourself in your thin blanket more out of ritual than warmth. Summer lingers, but the air tonight is restless. Your neighbor, Old Lou, lights a single taper next door. You can see its flicker through a crack in the wall like a firefly hesitating at the edge of its glow. Then it's gone, blown out or burned down. You don't know which. There's a poem your tutor once made you memorize. Something about stars and silence and the sound of one's own breath in the dark. You hated it then. Now you whisper it to yourself like a lullaby. You don't remember all the words, but the rhythm stays, and that's enough. Let's wander into a bit of nighttime history. The imperial capital was not designed for sleep. Even in darkness, it moved. Night soil collectors shuffled through alleys with their sloshing buckets and tired shoulders. Guards paced the walls, calling out the hours with gongs or clappers. Temples offered midnight incense for troubled hearts. And somewhere, always, someone was writing. Because for scholars, the night was not an enemy. It was a companion. Quieter, cooler, less likely to interrupt. There are entire collections of poetry composed by candlelight, letters drafted by moonbeam, philosophies shaped in the spaces between night sounds, but only if you had enough wax to finish your thoughts. You think about lighting one of your last 2 candles, just for a moment, just to see the page again, to feel like time is yours to carve. But you don't. Instead, you trace the outline of a character on your knee over and over. Quiet, not the word for silence, the word for stillness. It feels different in the dark. Less like absence, more like presence. Somewhere a rooster crows, too early, probably confused. You smile. Even the animals have bad nights. You shift against the floorboards. The ache in your back is familiar now, the kind that comes from long days and longer nights. You breathe in slow and deep, as if the dark itself could fill your lungs and calm your heart. You don't need light to rest, just space and patience, and maybe a cat to share the warmth. Sir arrives as if summoned by thought alone. He doesn't meow. He simply hops up onto your lap, turns once, and settles with the full weight of a noble creature who doesn't believe in asking permission. You stroke his back once, twice. His fur is cool, then warm, then nothing, just the rhythm of breath and the heavy quiet of understanding. You both stare into the dark together. Neither of you needs it to end. Let's pause softly. There's something deeply human about this kind of night. Not full of noise or light or distraction, just breath, just presence, just knowing that the world still spins even when the flame goes out. So tonight, as the stars hide behind the clouds and the breeze presses gently against the walls, remember this: you are still here, you are still breathing, and not every darkness needs to be feared. Some just needs to be shared. Fasting for ceremony, not choice. Your stomach growls before your eyes even open. A long, low complaint like a tiger, too polite to roar. You press a hand to your belly and whisper, "Not yet," as if your insides will respect diplomacy. Spoiler, they won't. But hunger isn't an accident today. It's a requirement, because it's the 9th day of the 7th lunar month, and the entire household is fasting, not because of famine, not because of poverty, but because of ritual. And nothing, not hunger, not dizziness, not even a perfectly good rice bun left over from yesterday can interrupt that. You rise slowly, no tea, no breakfast, just a rinse of the mouth and a faint prayer under your breath that you won't pass out before noon. The courtyard is quiet, not the peaceful kind, the restrained kind. Like everyone is trying not to talk too loudly for fear of accidentally reminding someone that porridge exists. You walk past the kitchen. It's dark, cold. The fire has been left unlit on purpose. Even the cat looks annoyed. Sir glares at you from the stove bench, clearly unimpressed by your inability to produce breakfast. He gives one small judgmental huff and leaps off to search for someone more useful. You bow, apologize again. Let's pause here and chew gently on the facts. Fasting, though, was not uncommon in Imperial China, but not always for health or diet. Often it was ceremonial. Officials fasted before making sacrifices at ancestral shrines. Entire households abstained from meat on the eve of funerals. Monks fasted to purify the spirit. Women fasted to honor gods of fertility. Scholars fasted to prove their moral clarity. And sometimes you fasted because someone higher up the ladder said it was a day of spiritual importance, even if that someone forgot to tell you what exactly you were fasting for. By mid-morning, your hands are shaking. Not dramatically, just enough to make your brush strokes sloppy. You're supposed to be copying a list of temple supplies for tomorrow's offering. Instead, the characters blur. You accidentally write the word for fish instead of candles. The supervisor catches it. He doesn't yell, just clicks his tongue and says, "Try again," with more focus. You nod. You don't say, "I haven't eaten since yesterday, and I'm hallucinating roasted duck." You think it very loudly, though. Outside, the air smells of incense, sweet, faintly smoky, enough to make your mouth water, which feels deeply unfair. A group of young servants passes, carrying a palanquin for a spirit tablet, their barefoot, solemn mouths pressed shut. One of them glances at you. His eyes are glassy. You recognize that look. It says, "I'd trade my honor for a dumpling." You nod, brother, you nod. At noon, you're permitted to drink water. You sip slowly as if it's broth. It isn't. But your brain is too hungry to argue. You watch the ripples in the cup like they're fortune tellers. They tell you you're not halfway through the day. You believe them. Let's indulge a strange detail. Some nobles, especially during the Qing dynasty, took fasting to artistic extremes. They recorded their hunger in journals like poetry. One famously wrote, "Abstaining sharpens the ink of the heart. My stomach complains, but the heavens nod." Translation, I'm starving and pretending to enjoy it. There were even fasting garments, loose robes made of unbleached linen, worn to signify purity. You're not wearing one. You're wearing the same robe as yesterday. It smells faintly of candle smoke, and quiet despair still counts. By dusk, the ceremonial altar is complete. Candles, not fish, are placed in bronze holders, offerings of empty bowls, because the act of absence is the point sit on silk cloths. The magistrate arrives robed in blue. He bows. The staff bows. Even Sir appears to bow, though it may just be a stretch. Prayers are whispered. A bell rings. You feel dizzy, not from devotion, from having exactly one drop of strength left. After the ceremony, someone hands you a bowl. Not food, not yet. Just warm water with a slice of ginger. It's the promise of food, the ghost of flavor. You drink it like it's sacred. It is. That night, you finally eat. Plain rice, a sliver of tofu, pickled greens. You cry a little, quietly, not from emotion, just because your body forgot how to chew without gratitude. Someone laughs nearby, a good laugh, soft, honest. You smile, because somehow, after a day of absence, this bland bowl of starch feels like the best thing you've ever tasted. You lie down with a full belly and an empty candle holder. No one has the strength to light anything, but you don't need light to feel full. Just warmth, just silence, just a belly that doesn't growl like a temple drum. So tonight, as your breath slows and your fingers relax, remember, there are kinds of hunger that come from the stomach and others that come from the spirit. And sometimes going without reminds you what you truly need. Not wealth, not glory, just a bowl of rice, a slice of ginger, and the hope that tomorrow the kitchen fire will burn again. It begins with a sound, a single low pluck of silk string, quiet but not shy. It echoes in the narrow street like a voice that knows you'll listen even if you pretend not to. You pause. It's late. You should be home, or at least back in your quarters, pretending to sleep, waiting for dawn and duty, and yet another bowl of plain rice. But tonight, the city is humming differently, and you follow the sound. Because sometimes music is not a detour, it's a summons. The room is hidden behind red lanterns and the soft laughter of women who speak in half poems and half truths. A courtesan's parlor, not a brothel, not a tavern. Something quieter, smoother, a place where conversation is currency, and the currency never quite runs out unless you do. You step in. A bell chimes above the door, low, silver, slightly cracked, like everything here, beautiful but aged by use. Inside, the world softens. Let's pause and set the stage. Courtesans in Imperial China were not simply entertainers. They were artists, poets, musicians, sometimes philosophers in embroidered robes. They were trained in the kin 7-string zither tea ceremony flower arranging and the art of saying just enough. They could quote Confucius and refute him in the same breath. They could match a scholar line for line in poetry, then win the argument with a smile. They were often more educated than the men who visited them, but they had no real freedom. They lived within a beautiful cage of silk and performance admired from afar, yet never quite invited into the world that claimed to adore them. Back in the parlor, the room glows with soft amber light. Shadows ripple across painted screens, birds bamboo clouds. A woman sits near the window legs folded beneath her, her kin resting on polished wood. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. Her fingers move like water on glass. Each note seems to bloom, then vanish. You don't know the song, but you know the feeling. It's the sound of remembering something you never experienced. You sit quietly. A girl in lavender silk brings tea. She says nothing, just bows. The tea is jasmine light sweet somehow, floral and sad at the same time. You sip it like you belong here. You don't. But for now, the room forgives you. The courtesan speaks softly. Her voice is lower than you expect. She asks, "Do you know why the chin has 7 strings?" You shake your head. She doesn't smile. Not quite. 1 string for joy, 1 for sorrow, 1 for longing, 1 for memory, 1 for war, 1 for peace, 1 for what we leave unsaid. Her fingers move again. This time, the melody is sharper. You feel it in your ribs. You wonder if your name would sound like that if someone strummed it across centuries. Let's not romanticize too much. Courtesans, for all their talent and elegance, were rarely respected outside rooms like this. They could not marry, could not inherit, could not leave unless bought, favored, or freed. They were admired and discarded, exalted and erased. One wrote, "My name is known by every guest, but none will take me home." Still, many preferred this life to the silence outside, where women had fewer words, fewer songs, and fewer choices. Here, at least, they had an audience, even if the applause was temporary. The music stops. The woman places her hands in her lap and turns to you. "What do you hear when I play?" she asks. You think carefully, then say, "I hear a story I don't know how to tell." She nods. That, apparently, is the right answer. You leave with the scent of sandalwood in your sleeves and a song you can't hum caught behind your teeth. The streets are quieter now, the stars more visible, the breeze cooler. You're not sure what just happened, only that something did. Back in your room, you lie on your mat and stare at the ceiling. Sir Pads in sniffs, your robe decides you're boring and curls up beside your feet. You close your eyes. But you don't sleep yet. You listen for echoes of that kin still vibrating in your chest. Not a melody, a message. So tonight, as dreams drift like lanterns across your mind, remember, there are people who live in silk and shadows, whose voices are music, whose names are forgotten, whose words shape centuries without ever being written down. And if you hear their song, listen, even if you don't understand, especially then. Rain begins without warning, not a polite sprinkle, not a slow drizzle with time to think. This is the kind of rain that falls like it has something to prove, sudden, loud, decisive. And of course, you're outside, without a hat, without a cloak, without a single shred of protection, unless you count your loosely folded scroll of imperial shipping records, which is now disintegrating into something that looks suspiciously like wet dumpling skin. You sigh, and then you laugh, because once the weather decides, nothing else matters. You duck under the nearest overhang, a crooked tile roof shared by a tea shop and an herbalist's stall. It smells of cinnamon mildew and desperation. A clerk joins you. He nods. You nod. Neither of you speaks. There's no need. Rain has a way of pressing pause on everything words, duty, decorum. You both just watch the storm. Let's talk about weather slowly. In Imperial China, the weather wasn't just background noise. It was policy. It was omen. It was judgment. A flood could bankrupt a province. A drought could spark rebellion. An untimely frost could ruin a harvest, a year a dynasty. And if a disaster came, the emperor was blamed. Because the emperor wasn't just a ruler, he was the son of heaven's representative on earth. And heaven, as it turns out, was picky. Thunderstorms during a royal procession, ancestral displeasure, a solar eclipse during an imperial birth, a warning, an earthquake during a court sentencing. Maybe reconsider that verdict. Weather was the sky's way of sending footnotes to history. You remember a story your uncle told once around a brazier on a stormy night. A magistrate in the South received a petition from a farmer during a drought. The man asked not for money or grain or tools, but for the magistrate to bathe. Why? Because he believed the official's unwashed body was offending the heavens. The magistrate complied. It rained that night. Coincidence? You decide not to find out. Back in the present, the tea shop owner hands you a towel. You nod gratefully and press it to your dripping sleeves. Inside the shop, someone has lit a stick of incense. The scent, something woody and sharp, wraps around the steam rising from ceramic cups. No one's rushing to leave. A young couple plays chess with mismatched tiles. A scholar sketches raindrops on a scrap of mulberry paper. Sir the Palace cat somehow appears dry and smug, curled atop a tea tin. You wonder how he got there. You don't ask. He wouldn't tell you. Let's go back to those who really watch the skies. The imperial court had weather watchers, officials who measured rainfall with bronze vessels, tracked wind with silk flags, and documented cloud shapes in scrolls bound with bamboo thread. There were entire departments devoted to the heavens: the Bureau of Astronomy, the Office of Celestial Harmony, the Registry of Rain and Thunder. Their job to predict, interpret, and explain. But even with charts and calculations, they knew the sky had moods, and sometimes it just decided. The rain begins to slow, not stop, just soften. The thunder mumbles instead of shouts. The wind, tired, leans back against the hills. You step out from beneath the overhang. The world glistens, stone glows, roof tiles shine. Even the gutters, overflowing chaotic, feel like something sacred. Children appear from nowhere barefoot, shrieking with joy. One splashes through a puddle with such unfiltered glee that you forget for a moment about the ruined scroll in your sleeve. You smile. The clerk beside you smiles. It's enough. You walk home under dripping trees. Their leaves tap against each other like gossiping neighbors. Your shoes are soaked. Your thoughts are quiet. Sir follows at a distance, stepping only in dry patches. Somehow, he finds them. Show off! You reach your door just as another gust of rain returns. But you're inside now, and for tonight, that's victory enough. You wring out your robe, hang it near the window, and light a candle. The flame flinches from the humidity, then steadies. Outside, the rain has settled into rhythm. Inside, so have you. So tonight, as water trickles from eaves and soft thunder hums like a lullaby, remember, sometimes the world decides for you. The plan is ruined. The path is blocked. The scroll is soaked. But the tea is warm. The candle is lit. And the rain has washed something clean you didn't know was dirty. The whisper arrives before the sun, slipped like a note under the tongue of the early rice seller, carried from ear to ear, stall to stall, tea house to temple. It has no name attached, no ink on parchment, no official seal, but it moves fast and it changes everything. By the time you're eating your breakfast, a reheated bun and half a boiled egg, someone is already asking, "Did you hear?" You shake your head. But the question answers itself, because the entire street is holding its breath. And you're already afraid, not because you've done anything wrong, but because you know in Imperial China sometimes a rumor is enough. Let's pause and speak softly now. In a world of strict hierarchy and careful decorum, a whisper could cause more destruction than a flood. A servant caught repeating a joke about a magistrate's limp beaten. A scholar suggesting the emperor was too fond of peaches imprisoned. A widow who said the stars looked angry exiled for predicting ill fortune. Words had weight, and they didn't need to be true. They only needed to be repeated. By mid-morning, soldiers arrive in the square. Not many, just enough. Enough to make people straighten their backs, drop their gaze, cover their mouths. They speak to the tea shop owner first, then the lantern maker, then your neighbor, Old Liu, who hasn't spoken above a whisper in 7 years. You pretend to sweep the courtyard, but your hands are shaking, because no one knows what the rumor was, only that someone said something they shouldn't have. And now someone else is gone. Let's follow a thread from the archives. During the Qing dynasty, there was a scholar named Han. Bright, careful, respected. One day during a festival, he commented on the emperor's new robe. He said, "That color will fade faster than loyalty." He thought he was being clever. 3 days later, he was arrested for sedition. Not because the emperor heard him, but because someone else did. Someone who wanted Han's job. Someone who smiled too politely. Han died in prison. His robes did not fade, but his name did. Back on your street, the air is changed. People speak only with their eyes now. A vendor drops a plate and no one reacts. The usual gossip whose son failed the exams, who owes rice to whom, falls silent, because the rumor has already claimed a name. And while no one says it aloud, everyone knows. It was a maid from the registrar's office, barely 20, quiet, quick with a broom, and quicker with a smile. She was taken at dawn. No trial, just removed. You remember the last time you saw her. She offered you a plum, slightly bruised but sweet. You hadn't asked for it. She said no one eats the soft ones, but they taste better. You nodded, took it, thanked her. You didn't know her name. Now no one will say it. That night, the city is too quiet. Even the crickets seem hesitant. The lamps along the main path are dimmed, not from lack of oil, but from caution. In the palace courtyard, Sir the cat stretches across a carved stone bench, blinking lazily. He doesn't care about rumors. He doesn't need words to survive. You envy him. Let's be honest. The rumor may not have even existed. Sometimes fear invents its own enemies, but the result is the same. Someone is missing, and the silence left behind her is louder than any accusation. You sit in your room brushing your sleeve over a scroll you're supposed to be copying, but the words won't stick. Instead, you draw a plum, round, bruised, sweet. You press your finger to the ink and whisper her name, quietly, to no one, to everyone. So tonight, as shadows drift softly across the walls, remember, truth is powerful, but so is fear. And in some places, survival meant silence. But memory is its own rebellion. Even whispered, even bruised, even soft, the road starts before your feet even touch it. It winds through your dreams, dirt-packed, dust-coated, always uphill. The kind of road that has already decided your story long before you ever take your first step. You wake before dawn. You always do on travel days. Because today you're not a scribe, not a servant, not even yourself. Today, you're a silk merchant, and the road, it doesn't care how tired you are. It just keeps going. Your pack is heavier than it looks. Silk may be light, but not when it's your life rolled tight into bolts of crimson ivory and indigo. The dye alone, imported expensive temperamental, must stay dry. The patterns, cloud motifs, phoenixes, river dragons must stay unwrinkled. The tax receipts, hidden between layers of cloth. You walk with care, you breathe with purpose, you do not stumble. The last man who stumbled near a tax station lost 2 bolts of brocade and gained a suspicious limp. Let's pause at the crossroads. In Imperial China, being a merchant was a strange thing. You were rich maybe, but low in status, respected in practice, disdained in theory. Confucian ideals put scholars on pedestals, farmers in the fields, artisans at their benches, and merchants at the bottom. Because you didn't produce, you moved, you profited, and yet, without merchants, the empire didn't eat, dress, build, or breathe. So they watched you closely, taxed you heavily, wrote laws that changed with the wind, and you walked anyway. By mid-morning, you're sweating through your outer robe. The sun hasn't even hit full strength, and already your feet ache. You pass a group of laborers pushing carts. One waves. You nod. No one stops. Because everyone on this road is moving for a reason. Trade routes weren't romantic. They were dirty, crowded, full of officials asking the wrong questions and bandits waiting for the right answers. And still, merchants walked. Some carried salt, others porcelain. You silk, which made you a target, but also a thread stitching together cities, provinces, and people who would never meet, but somehow all wore the same shade of blue. You stop beneath a willow for a midday rest. Unroll your mat, wipe your brow, check your bundle like it's a sleeping child. You eat dried plum-preserved bean curd and a scrap of rice cake, gone hard at the edges. Sir, the cat appears, of course, looking perfectly groomed and entirely unsweaty despite the dust. You offer him a bit of plum. He sniffs. He sneezes. He leaves. Typical. Let's open a dusty scroll of fact. Silk merchants traveled great distances, sometimes over 1,000 li, more than 300 miles, from weaving centers like Suzhou or Hangzhou to the capital, to border markets even beyond the Great Wall. They traveled by foot, by cart, by boat. They bribed toll keepers, bargained with dockmasters, soothed tax collectors with clever jokes and cleverer coin. Some kept journals. One wrote, "I have seen 5 provinces, 8 rivers, and slept in 30 beds. None better than the one I carried in my mind." By dusk, you reach a checkpoint. 3 guards, 1 dog, a desk that looks more dangerous than the men behind it. You smile, you bow, you present your papers. They frown at the seal, ask how much silk, how dyed, how woven. You answer everything with exactly enough confidence to be boring. They wave you on. You breathe again. Because the road didn't end, but at least it didn't stop you. You sleep in a roadside inn. 1 straw mat, 1 cracked basin, 1 bowl of rice with something pickled and possibly alive on top. You sleep anyway and dream of markets, bright cloth, fluttering fingers, tracing patterns, a little girl tugging at her mother's sleeve saying, "I want the red one." You never meet her, but her coin is what keeps your boots on your feet. So tonight, as your legs twitch from walking and your back hums with the ache of weight well carried, remember, sometimes history isn't made by kings or scholars. Sometimes it's carried on someone's shoulders, folded in bolts, bound with rope, guarded by calluses. The road is long, but so are the threads you leave behind. You've been putting it off for days. You run your fingers along your scalp, feel the edge of stubble beginning to curl. It itches just a little, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind you what happens if you wait too long. Not just personal discomfort, political discomfort. Because in this dynasty, your hair is not your own. It's a message, a loyalty statement, a blade's decision. And today, that blade is held by the barber. You duck into the alley behind the spice market where the smell of dried anise and star fruit masks the scent of old soap and sharpened metal. He's already there. Old Fan, the barber hands, like bone hook's eyes that have seen too much and still judge everything. He doesn't smile when he sees you, but he does nod, which means you're welcome, which is enough. Let's pause quietly. Hair has always been political, but in Qing Dynasty China, it was law-enforced, mandated, dangerous. When the Manchu conquered the Ming in the mid-1600s, they imposed a new hairstyle: shave the front half of your head and braid the rest into a queue. It wasn't optional. Keep your hair and lose your head. Cut your hair and keep it. Catchy, terrifying, unforgettable, and for some unforgivable. You sit on the low stool. Fan drapes a rag over your shoulders, dips his blade in oil, wipes it on linen, worn thin from years of use. He doesn't ask questions. He just begins. The first pass of the razor is gentle, a whisper, but you feel its weight in your chest. The front of your head is cleared. Again, hair falls like feathers into a basin, not just strands, but history, maybe heritage, maybe resistance, maybe nothing at all anymore. Fan ties the rest into a braid, tight, clean, taut like a bowstring. He knots it with practiced fingers, then gives it one tug sharp enough to hurt. Not punishment, just punctuation. You've complied. You've survived again. Let's sidestep into a darker corner. Many Han Chinese resisted the queue order at first. Some fought, some fled. Some cut their own braids in protest. Entire villages were burned in retaliation, heads shaved by force, executions carried out for hairstyles. Over time, resistance faded, but never quite disappeared. To wear the queue was to survive, to not wear it, to risk everything. And in the middle of it all, barbers. Neutral, necessary, dangerous. They held razors and choices, and often secrets. Fan finishes without a word. You hand him a coin. He doesn't check it. He knows its weight by feel. As you turn to go, he finally speaks. Too many men come late. You nod. You know what he means. Not lateness of time, but of decision. Some waited until the blade came from a soldier, not a barber. And by then, it was too late for anything but regret. Back on the street, the air feels different against your bare scalp. A mix of breeze and vulnerability. A child runs past you laughing, chasing a paper kite. His braid bounces behind him like a tail. He's too young to know what it means. You envy him. Sir watches you from a wall tail curled neatly around his paws. He blinks once. Your hair doesn't matter to him. He doesn't care about dynasties, just whether the sun hits the wall at the right angle for napping. Maybe he's right, maybe not. But either way, he's not the one who needed a razor this morning. You return to your room and light a small incense stick. The smoke curls upward in gentle swirls, reminding you that even hair like smoke can vanish without warning, leaving only the shape of something once there. You sit, you breathe. You do not touch your scalp, not yet. So tonight, as the wind rustles through your window and the blade's echo still hums against your skin, remember, there are kinds of silence sharper than razors. There are choices made not with words, but with scissors, with combs, with law. And survival sometimes means letting go of what once defined you in exchange for what still protects you. The bell above the door doesn't ring. It chimes soft and deliberate, like it's announcing your arrival to something older than sound. You step inside and the scent meets you like an old friend who's never forgotten your name, dried orange peel scorched, ginseng powdered pearl damp wood. This is not a place for the faint. It's a pharmacy, but not the kind with white coats and glass bottles. No, this is a Yao Fang, an apothecary of belief, where the shelves creak under the weight of centuries, and every drawer holds both a cure and a question. You're not here for yourself. At least, that's what you tell yourself. Your neighbor's daughter has a cough that won't stop, thin and dry and sharp like her lungs are trying to climb out. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. Her mother, desperate, sent you with a coin, a thread of hair, and a question. Is there anything that still works? You didn't know how to answer, so now you're here. The pharmacist is already watching you. He's old, of course. They always are. His beard is thin but stubborn. His eyes are clear but cruel. His hands look like they were carved from tree bark. He says nothing, just gestures to the counter. You place the coin, the thread, the silence. He nods, then begins. Let's breathe in a bit of history. Traditional Chinese medicine was not just herbs and potions. It was philosophy, an understanding of the body as a garden, something to be balanced, tended, not conquered. Sickness was not always an invader. Sometimes it was a misalignment, a cold wind that got in, a fire that burned too low, a spleen that forgot its duty. The remedies: earth, root, fungus, bone, and time. Always time. The pharmacist pulls out drawers with no labels, but each with meaning. One has scorpions, another powdered deer antler. There's a jar of something that might be dried lizard or bark shaped like fear. He pours, measures, sniffs, pinches, mutters. The air thickens. You feel like a witness to a ritual, a recipe whispered by ghosts. He wraps the bundle in rice paper, ties it with red thread, hands it to you without ceremony. Boil it, he says. until the water turns dark enough to scare you. Then 3 more minutes, you nod. He adds, don't let her eat peaches. You didn't plan to, but now you definitely won't. You turn to leave, but you pause because you don't know if it will work. Because she's small, because she's so quiet lately, because there's only this bundle now and the hope you carried in with it. The pharmacist seems to know what you're thinking. They don't always get better, he says, then adds, but sometimes the fear leaves first. And that's something. Let's not pretend this is magic. Some herbs worked, some didn't, some made things worse. But belief, that mattered even if only for a little while. To believe the bitter could help. To believe the hot tea could fight cold winds. To believe the body could be convinced to stay. Sometimes belief was the first medicine. In the last, you walk home slowly. The bundle is warm in your hands like it's already brewing. You pass the paper shop, the noodle stall, a boy drawing dragons in the dust. You nod to each. They nod back. Because everyone knows what a red thread around white paper means. Someone is sick. Someone is hoping. Back in the courtyard, the mother is waiting, eyes like dry wells. You hand her the packet, tell her what to do. You don't mention the peaches. Some things are too strange to explain. She bows so low, her forehead touches the stone. You want to stop her, but you let her finish, because when you're asking the world for mercy, sometimes you have to bow all the way down. That night, you sit with your own tea, not medicinal, just hot. Sir sits beside you, tail twitching, as if counting the minutes. The rain starts again, soft, reassuring. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, but the fire stays lit, the water stays hot, and somewhere just across the wall, a mother is whispering to her daughter, drink, please, just drink. So tonight, as the wind brushes past your windows and the herbs steep in pots unseen, remember, healing is not always in the hands. Sometimes it's in the act of trying, of brewing, of hoping, of believing that something, however strange, however bitter, might just bring someone back, not to perfection, just to breathing. You're reading by candlelight again, or at least pretending to. The brush hovers just above the page. Ink gathers at the tip like a secret too heavy to fall. Your eyes scan the lines, but you're not seeing the characters. You're thinking of a name, one you are absolutely not allowed to write, not allowed to say, not even allowed to think too clearly. Which means, of course, you're thinking it anyway, because there's something about forbidden things that makes them glow in the dark. It happened by accident. Someone mentioned a poem, a lovely one, really graceful, old, full of willow trees and mist and longing. You asked who wrote it. They hesitated, then whispered a name, so softly you almost didn't hear it. Almost. You wrote it down. A mistake, because the name is Imperial, a character from the Emperor's name. And that, friend, is a crime. Let's step carefully into context. In Imperial China, the Emperor's name was not something you used casually or at all. It was sacred, powerful, untouchable. If your child was born with a character from the Emperor's name in theirs, change it. If you had a shop sign, a poem, or a personal diary that included even one matching symbol, erase it. If you said the name aloud, even in admiration, apologize, hope, and erase your tracks. It was called naming taboo be hoy, be we. Not superstition, not paranoia, just survival. Back in your room, the candle flickers. You stare at the scroll. The character sits innocently on the page. A simple one, common even. But now, it feels like it's glowing. You reach for a cloth, dab at the ink. Too late. It's there. A small black mark with a big consequence. You think of burning the scroll, but smoke draws attention. You think of burying it, but dirt doesn't always stay loyal. You think of confessing, but you'd rather not spend the next year in silence, or prison, or worse, assigned to the latrine shifts during the summer festival. So instead, you rewrite the line. You change the name. You turn the emperor's character into something else. A tree, a bird, a word for stillness, which is what you're aiming for, really. Let's linger in the strangeness. There were historians in the Tang dynasty who spent months rewriting official texts after a new emperor took power, just to remove his birth name from all public records. Entire scrolls of poetry were restructured. Famous lines censored. One poor editor went blind from all the ink correction. He's remembered, the poem's forgotten. By morning, the mistake is gone. Not forgotten, but scrubbed, rephrased, folded into obscurity. No one would know. No one should. But still, you carry the weight of it, because it was a lovely name, because it meant something to you, because fear has a way of turning admiration into treason, and that feels unfair, but also familiar. You walk to the temple to clear your head. Along the way, a scholar is reciting verses under his breath. You recognize the poem. It's the same one. But when he reaches the author's name, he pauses, mouths the word silently, then moves on. You nod. He nods. No one says it. Everyone knows. Sir meets you at the gate. He stretches, yawns. He doesn't care about names. Only tone, only attention, only whether dinner is served at the correct hour, which, if you're honest, is a kind of wisdom. You return to your desk that night. The ink is dry. The mistake is gone. But a space remains where the name once sat. And somehow, that empty space says more than the character ever did. So tonight, as the candle burns low and the wind rustles, untouchable scrolls, remember, some names are powerful. Too powerful. So powerful, they vanish. But memory, it doesn't need ink, or permission, or sound. It just needs silence, and someone who still cares, even quietly. You're not sure when you started watching the sky. Maybe it was when the candles burned too low to read. Maybe it was the summer you couldn't sleep from the heat. Or maybe it's just that the moon is always there, quiet round, impossible to ignore. Tonight it's full again, so bright it spills light into your room like milk across a floor. And somewhere deep in the archives of memory and dust, you recall a name, the man who counted the moon. His story isn't in textbooks, not loudly. He wasn't an emperor, a general, or a poet with temples in his honor. He was a calendar keeper, a low-ranking official who wore plain robes, carried no sword, and rarely spoke above a whisper. But he watched the moon like it owed him something, and he wrote it down. Every curve, every clouded night, every time it arrived early or lingered long or vanished altogether. He didn't chase glory. He just wanted to know. Let's step carefully into the observatory. Imperial China had astronomers, not just astrologers in silk hats reading fortunes from star patterns, though there were plenty of those too, but mathematicians with ink-stained fingers and smoke in their lungs from long nights by candlelight. Their task, to keep the calendar correct, to predict eclipses, to track the rhythms of heaven so that rituals on earth would not offend the sky. Because if a royal sacrifice happened under the wrong moon phase, it wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. The man, you remember, his name was Zhao, was obsessed with precision. They say he once spent 7 years recording the shadow length of moonlight against a cedar branch just outside the observatory. He wasn't ordered to. He just did it. He believed every sliver of change held meaning. He was laughed at, quietly, politely, then with awe, because eventually he predicted a lunar eclipse, not just to the day, but to the hour. And the court fell silent, except for one man, who whispered, "What else does he know?" You tilt your head back now and look at the moon through the window lattice. It's so bright it feels solid, like you could reach up and slice a piece off for dessert. You wonder how Zhao recorded it. Did he draw it, measure it, talk to it? Did it talk back? Maybe not with words, maybe with return. Because the moon is reliable and lonely and always returning. Like the kind of friend who doesn't knock, just shows up and sits beside you in silence. You step outside for a better view. The rooftops are silver-tipped. The air is cool, quiet, holy, in that small, ordinary way. Sir joins you, doesn't look at the moon, just at you, which is somehow better. You sit on the steps. No rush, no questions, just moonlight and fur and stillness. Let's not forget, Zhao died unnoticed. No statue, no monument. Just a scroll discovered years later, filled with tiny notations. Some unreadable, some repeating. One simply said, "Tonight full, no clouds, felt known." You write it down in your own notebook. Different words, same feeling. Back inside, the candle is still burning, though the flame flickers like it's thinking of giving up. You place your fingers on the table, feel the cool wood, the warmth of your own pulse. You're not an astronomer. You're not recording for the emperor. But still you look, you notice, you remember. And in a world as fast as this, that alone is revolutionary. So tonight, as the moon floats overhead like an old friend who never forgot your name, remember, you don't have to explain why you care about quiet things, about shadows, about returns, about the slow math of light and time. Just count, just watch, just let it matter. Even if no one else does, especially then, you wake before dawn, not because you want to, because someone knocks. 3 soft taps against the courtyard gate, rhythmic, familiar. You don't need to ask who it is. You just open the door and there he is, a boy, maybe 12, maybe 15, small for his age, large in presence, slung across his back a wooden case worn, patched, and ink-stained. He nods, says nothing. He's here for your shadow. You sigh and step aside. He walks in like a breeze, with legs already setting down his tools, a frame, a silk screen, a small pot of black ink that smells like midnight and secrets. He unfolds a lamp with practiced ease, then gestures for you to sit. You do. You've done this before. Because this is Shadow Census Day. Let's explain that. In certain corners of the empire, especially the quieter ones, tucked between mountains and forgotten trade routes, The government issued more than tax slips and wheat tallies. They issued shadows. Once a year, every person had their silhouette painted, recorded, and archived in the provincial records. No one knows exactly why it started. Some say it was for identification. Others whisper it was for protection, to ward off spirits that stole names or impersonated faces. A few believe it was just a bureaucrat's poetic experiment gone wildly too far. But once a rule enters the books in ink, it never truly leaves. You sit against the screen. The lamp behind you glows warm. The boy adjusts it until your shadow stretches across the silk like a poem beginning to form. He dips a brush in ink and begins. Long, slow strokes, careful, reverent. You can't see his face, but you know his type. Quiet, steady, too old in the eyes, too young in the bones. A shadow boy. He doesn't speak until he finishes, and then only to ask same address. You nod. He nods back. Then any changes to note. You think, you want to say yes, I worry more, I sleep less, I've started to miss people I didn't even like. But instead you just say no. He writes it down anyway. Let's widen the lens. In some archives, the shadows were stored not alphabetically, but emotionally. One scroll for those with hopeful posture, another for melancholy profiles, a whole drawer for smiles that faded mid-year. It wasn't science. It wasn't logic. It was a kind of art, a quiet ritual of remembering how people stood when they thought no one was watching. He seals the silk inside parchment stamps. It then slides it into the wooden case. Another shadow collected, another presence preserved. He turns to leave. You stop him with a question. Do you ever look at the old one? He shrugs. Sometimes, when I can't sleep. And they're never the same twice. He hesitates, then adds, but some still feel warm. Then he's gone. You watch the gate swing shut. The morning is barely awake. The birds haven't started yet. The world feels unfinished. You go back inside, but you keep the lamp lit, just in case your shadow wasn't finished either. Sir appears as always when it's quietest. He sits where your shadow used to be and stretches like he's trying to become one. You wonder what kind of scroll he'd go into. Unimpressed but loyal maybe, or judging but fed. So tonight, as lamplight fades and your silhouette slips across the floor, remember, there are parts of you the world may never count. Not in taxes, not in census, not in proper records. But someone somewhere noticed your outline and thought it was worth preserving. Not because it was perfect, but because it was yours. The wind is restless tonight. Not angry, not cold, just curious. It weaves between the rooftops and flickers at your sleeves, tugging lightly like a child asking for attention. You light the lantern anyway, because that's what you always do. Same place, same hour, same tiny ritual match breath flame glow. Only tonight, it doesn't flicker, it doesn't struggle. It burns clean and steady like it has something to prove, which is strange, because it's lantern end season, and lanterns aren't supposed to last this long. You inherited this one, not from a relative, but from a neighbor who moved away before spring, left it behind, hung it on your door hook with a note. She still has light in her. Use her well. You thought it was a kindness or a joke, but now you're not so sure, because this lantern, it refuses to go out. Let's step back and explain. In Imperial China, lanterns weren't just decorations. They were calendars, prayers, stories you could carry. During the Lantern Festival, 15 days after Lunar New Year, entire cities lit up like memories made visible. Red paper spun in the wind. Rivers mirrored flames like they were trying to hold them. Each lantern meant something. One for luck, one for health, one for a child lost and still missed, one for a love not yet answered. They drifted, they danced, and eventually they dimmed. That was the rule, except yours didn't. It burned through the festival and the week after, and another. You even tried to douse it just once. A test. It hissed, fizzled, then reignited on its own. You laughed nervously, then let it be. Now people come to see it. Not crowds, just a few. A girl from the clay shop who lost her brother last spring. An old man with shaking hands who never speaks but always bows before he leaves. A delivery boy who doesn't stop, just slows his bike when he passes by. They don't ask questions, they just watch the light. And somehow it helps. Let's pause in the strangeness. There are legends of soul lanterns, paper lights lit with more than wax and oil, said to carry unfinished stories, or prayers so stubborn they refused to fade. Some were feared, others honored. But all of them had one thing in common. They lasted exactly as long as they were needed, not a moment less. You sit on the steps tonight, the lantern swaying gently beside you. The wind tries again, soft little bites, testing its resolve. It doesn't flinch. Sir curls at your feet, eyes half closed, but watching. You think of all the lights you've seen extinguish, the ones you let go, the ones you wish you hadn't. And you wonder, what is this lantern still holding? What has it not let go of yet? What are you still carrying? You whisper to it just once. It's okay. You can rest. But it doesn't. Not yet. The flame trembles, then steadies again, like it's saying, not tonight. So tonight, as shadows stretch and the wind gives up its gentle argument, remember, some lights stay because someone somewhere still needs them. Not because they burn brighter, but because they burn longer. Because something inside them said, I'll wait, even when everything else faded. There's a rumor in the scroll hall. It started somewhere between the ink pots and the vermilion seals passed down from brush to brush, never written, only breathed. The rumor says the emperor knows everything, not because of spies, not because of sorcerers, but because of whispers, thousands of them, delivered in silence every single night. You first heard it when you were a child, half asleep under your father's desk while he copied edicts. A clerk came in, bowed too low, and said, "One of the ears has arrived." Your father nodded. You didn't understand, not then, but now you know. Let's enter the hush of the Forbidden City, not the courtyards with marble lions and echoing steps, not the throne rooms or audience halls. No, we're going beneath all that, to the narrow halls behind the kitchens, the forgotten garden paths, the side doors in the astrologer's tower. This is where the Whisper Network lives, an entire system of soft-voiced messengers trained to listen more than speak. They were eunuchs mostly, but also scribes, servants, musicians, anyone whose presence was so expected it became invisible. Their job to gather the truth, or at least the version of truth people say when they think no one is listening. The emperor didn't ask for reports. He asked for tones. What does Minister Zhao sound like when he sighs? How often does the first consort hum at night? Was the stable boy whistling because he was happy or nervous? And the whispers answered, not with facts, but with atmosphere. Let's pause for the strange. It's said that Emperor Xuan of the Han Dynasty once avoided an assassination attempt simply because a whisperer told him the chief guard has stopped wearing his favorite boots. That was it. No letter, no dagger found, just missing boots. But it was enough. The emperor moved his quarters that night. The next morning, a blade was discovered under his former bed. Sometimes the quiet things shout loudest. Back in your present moment, you're reading aloud in a study that isn't yours. A borrowed room, a borrowed scroll, a borrowed task. But a familiar scent lacquer and lotus root tea tells you someone important has sat here often. You stumble over a character, pause, start again. You hear a cough outside. Not the sick kind, the warning kind. Someone's listening. You don't panic. You don't stop. You modulate, change the pitch, soften the verbs, skip one word that might mean doubt. Because maybe, just maybe, someone will whisper about you tonight, and you want the tone to be kind. Sir is here too. Of course he is. He's sitting on a pile of shredded bamboo paper like it's a throne. If he were part of the Whisper Network, you'd never know. Which is precisely the point. You think of all the things you've said when no one seemed to be listening. The complaints, the secrets, the laughter. You wonder how many of them were heard, how many of them mattered. So tonight, as you blow out your candle and the walls hold your breath like it's sacred, remember, words are powerful. Even the ones we mumble, especially the ones we mumble. Because somewhere, someone might be listening, not to judge, but to understand. And maybe, just maybe, to protect you before the blade ever touches the bed. You've always liked libraries, even the dusty ones, especially the dusty ones. There's something calming about the quiet, not the silence of absence, but the presence of still things, of breathless waiting, of stories that don't mind being forgotten for a little while as long as someone eventually comes back. And tonight, you're here again, candle in hand, to visit the librarian, the one who burned nothing. They say her name was Meilan, not a poet, not a noble, not even a scholar, technically, just the keeper of a provincial archive in a city whose name kept changing every few dynasties. You'd think then that nothing she did would last. But that's where you'd be wrong, because Meilan kept everything. Every banned scroll, every misspelled decree, every folk recipe scribbled on the back of a rice tax form. She should have destroyed them. She was ordered to, but she didn't. Let's step softly into her archive. It wasn't a grand hall, it was a cave, literally. Carved into the rock behind the monastery kitchens, smelled like steam buns and old moss. Inside, shelves made from bamboo stalks, ink jars capped with wax and old plum pits, scrolls wrapped in silks patched more times than you could count. She called it the second library, the one for things that shouldn't exist, but did, and that mattered. There was a year, maybe more than one, when the new emperor wanted purity of thought, of style, of records. So anything pre-dynasty had to be purged or harmonized, which meant rewritten with nicer words and fewer contradictions. Meilan nodded when they told her, smiled, then copied everything by hand, twice, and hid the originals under soup crates, inside hollow prayer drums, behind a false wall made of scrolls that all had the title Inventory of Inkstones, Volume 7. There was no Volume 1-6. Let's pause for the odd detail. She even saved letters addressed to dead people, just in case they rot back, she said. No one argued with her. You don't argue with a woman who keeps the stories of emperors and beggars in the same tone of voice. You walk through the library tonight like a guest in a place that still remembers how to breathe. Your fingers drift across the spines. Soft rice paper, silk faded to near transparency. You spot one scroll labeled only regret, another unsent, another still recipe for dumplings that made a prince cry. You don't unroll them. You don't need to. The titles are enough to feel held. Sir knocks over a stack of philosophy treatises. You leave them. Philosophers can wait. Let's not pretend Maylan was praised. She wasn't. She was demoted once for failure to properly discard, given less ink, fewer assistants, assigned night shifts year-round. She accepted and kept writing because she believed this. What's forgotten isn't always unimportant, and what's unimportant now might be everything later. When she finally died quietly in her chair, mid-sentence, they found a letter on her desk, addressed to no one. It read, "If you are reading this, thank you. Please keep going. There is more worth saving than you think." They left the letter right where it was and lit a second candle beside it. So tonight, as your own candle flickers and the world outside forgets itself a little more, remember, you don't have to be famous to be remembered. You don't have to speak loudly to matter. You just have to care enough not to burn what others discard. Even if it's just one sentence, even if it's just your own, you smell it before you see it. Something warm, something sweet, something savory too, like onions slow cooked into memory. You follow the scent barefoot on old tiles through a corridor that hums with steam and soft footsteps. And then you're there, inside the Imperial kitchen, but not the grand one you'd expect. This is the early kitchen, the real one, before palaces, before gold. Just a stone hearth, a copper pot, and a woman with flour on her nose and a spoon in her hand. She nods at you, doesn't ask why you're here, just gestures to the bench. Sit, watch, taste, let's roll back time. Before the Forbidden City, before the Tang Court sparkled in silk and poetry, there was food, always food, not as luxury, but as logic. Because a full belly made calm soldiers, and calm soldiers built steady empires. So long before the first war chariot ever rolled, the kitchen was already in session, and the woman stirring that pot, she was the emperor's first advisor. He just didn't know it yet. Her name is lost. History didn't write her down, but her recipes survived, not in royal cookbooks, in logs, inventory sheets, letters from guards begging for more of that broth from the solstice, and one anonymous scroll simply titled, "How to Feed a God Without Getting in Trouble." It included one humble bowl of rice, one sprig of green onion, silence while eating. Back in the kitchen, the woman hands you a dumpling. It's imperfect. One side folded unevenly, a little plump in the middle. It's also the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. You don't ask for the recipe. She wouldn't give it anyway. Because here, recipes aren't written. They're remembered by feel, by by scent, by the way someone you love closes their eyes when they chew. Let's pause for the strange. There's a record from the song Dynasty of a cook who saved an entire city. How? By feeding the invading general a dish that tasted like his mother's. He cried and changed his mind. He left by morning. The city rang the bells in thanks, but the cook, she went right back to slicing ginger. Didn't even look up. You stay all evening, helping stir, washing radishes, learning how to know when oil is hot by listening, not looking. Sir curls up under the counter. He's full. From what you don't know, he won't say, but he's purring, and that's enough. When it's time to leave the cook hands, you a pouch. You open it. It's not a meal. It's a list. 10 dishes, each one matched to a mood. For heartbreak, for fear, for quiet victories you can't tell anyone about. At the bottom, she's written, you don't cook for hunger, you cook for remembering. Then she turns back to the stove. You let her be. So tonight, as your own kitchen settles into quiet and the scent of rice and garlic clings to your sleeve, remember, empires may rise on war and marble and titles, but they're held together by kitchens, by the people who feed others before feeding themselves, by the ones who ask nothing, but still know when you need a second bowl. Eat slowly, chew softly, and save the last bite for the memory it leaves behind. It begins with a brush, not a special one, just wood and hair and a faint scent of ink. You pick it up without thinking, fingers remembering before your mind does. You dip it in water, not ink, and start painting on the table. Invisible strokes, lines that vanish before they form. But somehow it feels right, because that's exactly how he used to do it. The artist who drew without lines, let's find him. He didn't live in a palace or a studio. He didn't wear robes embroidered with dragons. He lived on a riverboat, tiny, drafty, smelled like fried fish and camphor wood, but on the walls, no paintings. He didn't hang them because he didn't keep them. He painted only with water on stone, on wood, on bare sun-warmed walls. Each image lasted minutes, maybe seconds, then gone. You ask him why one day, he shrugs. If it matters, I'll remember. If it doesn't, I won't. You think it's arrogance until he shows you. He paints a crane with nothing but wet strokes on dry bamboo. No outlines, just motion, wings in the act of rising. You blink, it's beautiful. You blink again, it's fading. And yet, you still see it, somehow clearer now. Let's pause for the peculiar. There's a record, just one of a wandering painter known only as the unframed brush. He refused to sell his art, refused to sign anything. Once painted an entire wedding procession on the palace courtyard stones, using only snow. It melted before the bride arrived. The guests were furious, but the bride, she said, that was the first time I felt seen. Back in your present moment, you try it too. You wet your finger, drag it across the windowsill, make the shape of a mountain, a moon, a cat. Sir approves. He climbs into your lap, pawing at the air where your image lingers. You wonder if he sees more than you do. Wouldn't be the first time. You remember what the painter once told you on a quiet evening by the river? Lines trap things. Sometimes it's better to let them go. He looked at the stars, then added, but not everything. Some things are worth framing, like silence, like soup, like the look someone gives you when they think you're not watching. You find an old scroll tonight, blank. You unroll it, and instead of drawing, you breathe on it. Let the condensation leave a ghost mark. You've painted nothing and everything. So tonight, as the fog thickens outside and the world softens into gray, remember, not everything needs to last to matter. Some beauty is meant to vanish. Some truths arrive only once. Some moments, if held too tightly, lose their meaning. Draw anyway, write anyway, love anyway. Even if it fades, especially then, there's no ticking. That's the first thing you notice. No gears turning, no hands moving, no pendulum swinging from side to side. But the time still changes. You stare at the clock across the room, its wooden face worn smooth by years, the lacquer faded to a warm hush. There's no chime, no bell, no sound at all, and yet, somehow, it always knows when morning begins, because this is a clock that runs on silence. Let's rewind. In a monastery nestled between two hills and too many clouds, monks once lived by the hours of quiet. They had no bells, no roosters, no sand-filled tubes that flipped and hissed. They just listened to the way the wind shifted through cedar, to the moment nightbirds stopped singing, to the instant breath turned from dream to waking. And from that, they marked time. You think it's impossible, but it worked. Because when you listen that closely, the world has a rhythm, not one of seconds and minutes, but of shifts and pulses, like the way dew appears on the same patch of grass before sunrise, the way the teapot steam slows right before the temple opens, the way your own heart knows when it's been too long since laughter. And so they built a clock, not of parts, but of attention. Let's pause for the curious. There's a surviving record of one such monk, a man named Jin. He kept no personal belongings, but every morning without fail, he opened the monastery gates precisely 7 minutes before sunrise. Not once did he miss it. When asked how, he simply said, "The earth tells me when it's time. I just try not to interrupt her." Back in your room, the silent clock sits steady. You still don't know how it works. Maybe it's broken. Maybe it's perfect. You sit beside it. You don't wind it. You don't touch it. You just close your eyes. And for once, you listen. You hear things you usually miss. The thump of a moth hitting the window. The soft creak of the floor adjusting to the night. Sir breathing deeply curled at your feet, dreaming of something that makes his whiskers twitch. And underneath it all, stillness, but not empty. Full of time that doesn't need to announce itself. You remember a quote from a scroll left under your pillow one spring. Noise tells us what hour it is. Silence tells us who we are during it. You didn't understand it then. You might be starting to now. So tonight, as your own thoughts begin to slow and the air around you turns to velvet, remember, not all timekeeping ticks. Not all memories are loud. Not all moments demand to be counted. Some of them just are. And they ask nothing more than your quiet presence. The world will move with or without noise. But when you listen to its silence, you finally begin to move with it. Your hands are stained with ink again. Black in the nail beds. Blue where you rubbed your chin while thinking. A strange splotch near your elbow that looks suspiciously like a coastline. You didn't mean to draw it, but it's there now, another accidental continent, another piece of a world that never quite stays still. You sigh, wipe your sleeve, and whisper a quiet apology to the mapmaker who came before you, the one who never finished a single map. Let's find him. He lived during the Ming Dynasty. Tall, quiet, didn't eat fish, always wore gray. His scrolls were legendary, not because they were accurate, but because they were alive. Mountains curled like sleeping animals. Rivers meandered like conversations. Cities danced just slightly to the left of where they should have been. People thought he was careless. He wasn't. He just refused to draw the world as if it stood still. Because to him, maps were not snapshots. They were stories in motion. He had a rule: never draw the edges. He left borders unmarked, coastlines unfinished, roads that wandered off the parchment like they had better places to be. When asked why, he said, because the world hasn't agreed on where it ends yet. Let's pause for the peculiar. One of his maps, now kept in a museum that smells faintly of old books and camphor, has a note written in tiny brush script in the bottom corner. It reads, "Here be something. I just don't know what yet," and that's okay. It's considered the most honest annotation in cartographic history. Back in your present moment, you trace the lines you've drawn today. They wobble, they diverge. One turns into what might be a dragon if you squint. You think of how much pressure we put on maps to tell us where we are, where we've been, where we should go. But sometimes it's enough to admit we're still looking. Sir climbs onto the table, paws one corner of the scroll, looks at you like he's asking if this dot is a mountain or just a tea stain. You tell him both. He accepts that, because good maps hold mystery. You recall what the mapmaker once told a student who asked when a map is finally done, when the traveler no longer needs it, and not a moment sooner, which means yours. Still very much in progress, and that's fine, more than fine. That's the point. So tonight, as your breath slows and the ceiling above becomes its own vast sky, remember, you don't have to know where every road leads. You don't have to finish the outline. You don't have to pretend the unknown is frightening just because it's blank. There's beauty in the in-between. There's peace in not yet. And maybe, just maybe, the best maps are the ones that leave a little space for discovery. The emperor's shoes were always clean. You wake before dawn, not from noise, not from a dream, just the gentle certainty that it's time. The air is still cool, the sky still soft, and your shoes waiting neatly by the door, polished without a smudge. Which reminds you, the emperor's shoes were always clean. Let's step into the forbidden city once more, past the gold roofs and red pillars, past the scholars and scrolls and the ever-watching eyes of carved lions. We're going down into the quiet wings, where shoes wait in rows, each pair assigned its own attendant, and among them one story shines. The emperor's shoes, white silk with embroidered clouds, were never dirty. Not during rain, not through gardens, not after hours of inspection tours through muddy roads. Clean, always. So how? Magic? No. Men, specifically a group of eunuchs, known unofficially as the sweepers of the soul. They worked in pairs. One walked precisely 2 paces ahead, brushing the ground with a silk broom. The other followed behind, wiping any mist dust before it could settle. Their job, to make sure the emperor never knew what dirt felt like. Let's pause for the curious. They weren't just cleaners. They were signalers. If the shoes came back scuffed, it meant unrest. If the shoes were returned damp, it meant the emperor had stepped into something unexpected, like a heated debate or a flooded council chamber. Some believed you could predict the empire's health by the state of His Majesty's soles. You lace your own shoes now. They aren't silk. They're soft, worn canvas, the color of stormy tea. But they feel royal enough when you remember to move through the world like every step matters. You think of the sweepers, of their quiet dignity, their invisible care. You wonder who in your life walks ahead of you, brushing the path clean, who follows behind catching what you drop, who keeps your steps light without ever asking for thanks. Sir walks across the room trailing a leaf on his tail. He doesn't clean your path, but he does make it better, which honestly is close enough. You step outside. The earth is damp with morning, but your shoes remain dry, not because of silk, but because you're moving slower now, more gently, more aware, like someone might be watching, like your footprints might be remembered. So tonight, as the final candle dims and the stories settle like dust in a well-swept corridor, remember? You don't need to wear an emperor's robes to walk with care. You don't need servants to walk with grace. You only need a little attention to the ground beneath you, to the people beside you, to the quiet rituals that hold the world together. So now here you are. The story is over, not with a bang, not even with a whisper, but with the soft settling of dust on a windowsill. Outside, the fog holds the rooftops like a lullaby. Inside, the candle flickers one last time before surrendering to the dark. You've walked through alleys of ink and ceremony. You've stepped into kitchens, libraries, gardens, and throne rooms. You've watched emperors grow quiet and servants glow gentle. You've seen what it meant to endure in a world that didn't wait. And still, there were kindnesses, a bowl passed hand to hand, a map left unfinished, a lantern that stayed lit just long enough. Not grand gestures, but small things, the kind that hold history together. And perhaps that's the real secret of Imperial China. Not the palaces or the battles or the silk, but the soft moments between them, the human ones. So tonight, as the last sounds of the city fade, boots, slowing clocks, ticking the wind, breathing softly through old cracks, let it all go. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the stories tuck you in. Even the oldest tales have something new to say if we listen gently. May this moment of quiet carry you through the night like a soft breeze through open windows. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.